the World Wrestling Federation without Bret Hart is like peanut butter without jelly. So I am as much awaiting the return of Bret Hart as the fans of the World Wrestling Federation.
Into his gallbladder was actually endangering his life. The surgery, thankfully, was a success, but the future of one of the most promising young superstars in the WWF remains in question. Our colleague Kevin Kelly traveled to Ahmed's home in Houston, Texas today and filed this report.
Look at this!
I'll say it ain't so.
Where did Undertaker just set up? Why? Why is this going on? What has possessed Paul Bear? After everything he said.
Undertaker's out of it.
Oh. What?
Oh, stop that! Stop that! That's hideous!
On to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. Today we go back in the time machine to August 1996 to look at all things WWF here on Volume 1. Volume 2, split across 2 parts this month, is our WCW show. Volume 3 will be looking at all things ECW. But here it is WWF time with my guest, Mr. Bob Bamber. Hello, Bob.
Good evening.
Nice to meet you. And we also have Mr. Steve Halvorsen. Steve, how are we?
Hey, I'm very good, thank you.
Very nice to hear it, gents. Our main focus today will be the SummerSlam pay-per-view, but there'll be 1 or 2 other things to talk about as well. Kick us off with the news, please, gents.
Okay, we kick off with 2 big news stories away from the ring this month. The first of these is the WWF are planning on bringing in weekly pay-per-views. You hear that right? Weekly pay-per-views. At present, the plans are to hold the hour-long events live on a Saturday at midnight, although these will be pre-recorded on a Friday. That's also been discussed. The events will take place in addition to all the current pay-per-view events that are currently on the slate, with a starter price of $9.95. The new show could begin as early as next month, although at the time of recording, the WWF are struggling to find cable carriers willing to host these broadcasts.
The second major development this month is that of a deal being agreed for Bret Hart to return to the WWF. Vince McMahon met Hart at his home in Calgary to thrash out the terms, and at present he is being earmarked to appear at either the September or October pay-per-view. Having said that, no new formal contract has yet been signed, so despite Bret continuing to appear on pre-scheduled overseas dates for WWF, an official offer from WCW at this point cannot be ruled out, with the possibility of some acting gigs to try and help lure him across.
A very real injury was suffered by Ahmed Johnson at the hands of Farouk on the July 29th Raw. An errant kick caused internal bleeding to one of Johnson's kidneys, and urgent surgery was required. He is expected to be out for several months. Footage of the surgery was shown on the August 12th Raw, as was an interview with a clearly distressed Johnson, which you'll be able to hear later on in the show. The injury had a major impact on both single titles, as Ahmed was forced to relinquish his Intercontinental title, which has now been held up for a 8-man tournament, and his shot at the WWF title, which had been planned for August the 19th Raw, has also had to be canned.
Ahmed Johnson was also due to face Farouk at the SummerSlam pay-per-view. The event, held in Cleveland, Ohio on August the 18th, was met with very tepid reviews, especially given its status as the WWF's second biggest show of the year. In the main event, Shawn Michaels successfully defended the WWF title against Vader in a match that was restarted twice after Vader originally won by DQ and then later countout. Prior to this, Mankind defeated The Undertaker in the first ever Boiler Room Brawl after Paul Bearer turned heel on his longtime compadre. There are also wins on the card for Owen Hart, Smoking Guns, Sid, Goldust and Jerry the King Lawler.
And the ratings news. On the 29th of July, WWF polled a 2.1 to WCW's 3.1. On the 5th of August, it was a 2.8 against a 3.0. On the 12th of August, it was a 2.0 against a 3.3. And on the 19th of August, it was a 2.9 against a 3.5. There was no Raw on the 26th of August, thanks to the US Open.
Earlier today, Kevin Kelly had an occasion to chat with the WWF champion.
Shawn, we saw you recently get back-jumped by Mankind, and of course, the punishment that you suffered at the hands of Vader at the international incident. Given all the recent circumstances, all the things that have been happening to you, do you feel at this time that your world is beginning to crumble in around you?
Well, I think that there's some people that might say my world crumbling. down around me might be a little melodramatic, but I certainly am facing adversity. But in the past, Shawn Michaels has dealt with and come through when dealing adversity. So I think at times like this is when I'm my strongest. I've never told anybody I was unbeatable. I've never said I was invincible. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, is like every guy walking the street. It just so happens that I'm a superstar in the World Wrestling Federation. This is the way that I make my living. I can be beaten on any given night. I freely admit I felt the Vader bomb. He beat me. But at SummerSlam, he's going to have to face me one-on-one. And I'm never out there alone. I've got the clique behind me, Jose Lothario in my corner. And like I said, as long as I have that with me, I can take on anybody.
Shawn, when you face Vader at SummerSlam, you're going to be giving up over 200 pounds of weight. Certainly this is a big disadvantage. Is this the match where the boyhood dream now becomes a nightmare?
Are the odds stacked against me? Yes, they are. Do I have a tough fight on my hands? Yes, I do. Going into the match, there are always concerns. And anytime you step in the ring, and for me, there's a great many concerns. There's a fear of getting hurt. There's a fear of, more importantly, losing the World Wrestling Federation title. I can't emphasize enough how much being the World Wrestling Federation champion means to me and has brought to my life. And there are a number of people that may think that's awfully shallow, but I've waited for a long, long time to be the World Wrestling Federation champion, and I've waited for a long time to enjoy my life as the World Wrestling Federation champion. But the fact of the matter is, to beat Shawn Michaels, you have to beat me and all the people that are behind him. And so far, there hasn't been any superstar in the World Wrestling Federation that can do that when it comes to the World Wrestling Federation title being on the line.
Ever since you defeated Bret Hart at WrestleMania, many of your critics have claimed that the victory over Bret Hart, while an impressive one, was maybe a little tainted, the overtime in the Iron Man matchup. Bret Hart has spoken on several occasions about possibly coming back in the near future. Do you have any words for Bret Hart?
Well, for Bret Hart, I hope that he does return to the World Wrestling Federation. The World Wrestling Federation without Bret Hart is like peanut butter without jelly. So I am as much awaiting the return of Bret Hart as the fans of the World Wrestling Federation. And as far as the critics and the way I won the World Wrestling Federation title, well, they're critics. That's what critics do. They criticize you. So I'm certainly used to that, and it's something that you are going to get no matter how well or how badly you do this job. As the World Wrestling Federation champion, everybody's going to take their shots at you.
Now, Shawn, later on tonight at Raw is the Raw Invitational Battle Royal. The winner of the Battle Royal gets a shot at the WWF champion the day after SummerSlam. Any thoughts?
Well, that situation, to me, personifies why I'm the only guy in the World Wrestling Federation that can be the WWF champion, because I just don't think there's another superstar in the WWF that could take on this schedule, that could go out there at SummerSlam, face a 450-pound man, and then be asked to face another top-notch superstar in the World Wrestling Federation the next night, on top of the schedule that I already have. And Vader, make no bones about it, he is one tough customer. But the next night, he could possibly lose that title on Raw. World Wrestling Federation is filled with very competent superstars, but there's one shining star above all the rest, and I like to think that it's me.
The first Raw of the month begins with Jerry Lawler versus Aldo Montoya. He offers Aldo a bottle of Jim Beam, or Jake Roberts' tag team partner, as he calls it. Lawler wins and afterwards shoves the bottle down Aldo's throat. The new and improved Rockers attack their opponents, the Body Donners, before their match. A picture-in-picture is shown of Gorilla Monsoon reinstating Clarence Mason's climb. This will be Crush. A good TV contest ends with the Smoking Guns interfering. The Godwins then run in and the babyfaces clean house. Kevin Kelly conducts a sit-down interview with Shawn Michaels. Shawn says he's facing adversity, but at SummerSlam against Vader, he will have the clique behind him. And with them, he can achieve anything. Kelly then asks HBK if he has any words for Bret Hart. The WWF without Bret Hart is like peanut butter without jelly. Nobody else in the WWF can take on the schedule that Michaels does, and he alone is the, quote, one shining star above the rest. The main event is the Raw Invitational Battle Royal to determine the number one contender for the WWF title on the August the 19th Raw. The Undertaker charges to the ring, quite a sight that is, and goes straight after Mankind. They eliminate each other and brawl all around the arena throughout the match. The final four are Ahmed, Goldust, Sid and Austin. The eliminated Bulldog and Owen re-emerge and distract Sid long enough for Austin to jump in from behind and send him packing. Ahmed and Goldust team up to dump Austin to the floor. Ahmed charges Goldust near the ropes. Both men tumble over the top, but Ahmed manages to hook his legs around the ropes as Goldust falls out. Ahmed wins. Farouk interrupts Ahmed's celebration interview and they have a pull-apart brawl as we go off the air. We get a cold open on the 12th of August with Vince McMahon voicing over a piece on the very real injury to Ahmed Johnson sustained at the hands of Farouk. Our first match is Farouk, who with an audibly angry Vince calls a thug, against Skip. Farouk wins with a devastating looking inverted front power slam. Clarence Mason introduces the returning Crush. He's dressed in ripped street clothes to get over the jailbird gimmick. Mason tells us Crush was never convicted of the weapons charged against him. Mason's guest commentary is more fun than the match here, which Crush wins against Savio Vega with a full Nelson. Sonny can't find any clothes to wear for the Bikini Beach blast-off. We don't obviously see that, obviously. Lawler offers to help in his usual chivalrous way. We see real footage of the surgery to Ahmed Johnson's ruptured kidney. Ahmed tells Kevin Kelly the physical pain is nothing compared to the mental pain. Doctors have informed him that if the bleeding persists, his kidney might need to be removed. Ahmed seems legitimately close to tears. The Godwins beat T.L. Hopper and Who. Bob Backlund campaigns throughout the match. Monsoon tells us that the severity of Ahmed's injury, the Intercontinental title will now be vacant. A tournament will begin next week on Raw to crown a new champion. Mr. Perfect interviews Bret Hart aboard the Wrestle Vessel. Bret hopes that whatever happens, people are happy with his accomplishments. He loves being at home and is going to take time to make his decision regarding coming back to the WWF. He is extremely non-committal here. Our go-home main event is Shawn Michaels against Owen Hart. Michaels wins a typically great TV contest after two super kicks. Afterwards, Shawn eventually succumbs to the interfering Vader. Vader hits 2 Vader bombs. Then we go off the air with him teasing a moonsault.
Into his gallbladder was actually endangering his life. The surgery, thankfully, was a success, but the future of one of the most promising young superstars in the WWF remains in question. Our colleague Kevin Kelly traveled to Ahmed's home in Houston, Texas today and filed this report.
First off, Ahmed, I want to thank you for allowing me to come into your home and to take this time to talk to you. Everybody is very worried about you. We've heard a lot of things about your medical condition. At this moment right now, how are you feeling?
Well, you know what? I can always ignore the physical pain. This isn't the first time I've been in physical pain. It's more the mental pain that's playing the game with me right now. The mental pain hurts worse than anything in my life right now. It's the mental pain.
Ahmed, what symptoms did you have that alerted you to call for help and eventually require emergency surgery?
Well, I guess it started when I was laying in bed at night at the hotel, and it felt like my inside was just turning flips, and my whole side and stomach area just felt like it was turning ice cold. And at that point, I knew then there was something wrong.
What exactly have the doctors told you is the injury? What exactly happened to your kidney?
What happened to my kidney was when I got kicked in my kidney.
By Farouk?
By Farouk. It somewhat burst my kidney. And then being in a battle royal after that didn't help matters any. With Goldust and Stone Cold Steve Austin and everybody else kicking me all on my kidneys and everything, it didn't help any. It just made the tear a little wider than what it was.
Did the doctors ever say that there was a chance of losing the kidney?
Well, yeah, the doctors told me so far it's just bleeding, and if it doesn't start bleeding, then from my understanding, they're going to have to take my kidney out. Basically.
Have you thought about your future if you're no longer able to compete in the WWF?
I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know if I'll ever be able to perform again. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to be at my highest point again in my life. I don't know right now. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to defend that Intercontinental title or the World title I don't know if I'll ever be able to defend that ever again in my life. So I really want to ask that question.
And we come out of our TV reviews there. Before we tackle our big event, which is SummerSlam, just want to have a brief chat about the injury suffered to Ahmed Johnson, primarily because it meant, as we heard in the news, that both singles titles, plans for those, had to be heftily rearranged. And Steve, it's a bit of a vicious irony, really. Every time we've talked about Ahmed Johnson on this podcast, we've talked about these, let's say, possible propensities for injuring opponents, and here he's fallen victim to nothing more vexatious than a kick to the back, which has put him out of action for a considerable amount of months, and has led to all plans are having to be changed. It's regardless of what you think of him, it's very unfortunate. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because when we saw that interview, I mean, he was, clearly distressed. Let's put it that way. The booking plans have gone out the window. I think, to say that some of the matches on SummerSlam were hastily rearranged, you could see that on the night, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But getting back to Johnson himself, I mean, I don't particularly think he's the greatest thing. Clearly they do. Clearly the Federation, have big sort of plans for him, and Vince McMahon thinks that he's, an absolute superstar. I mean, I wouldn't agree with any of that, but no one wants to see anyone getting injured. And he was just on the verge there. I felt that, he'd probably have a big match at SummerSlam. He had that title shot lined up the day after. Now, whether he won any of the belts sort of is irrelevant, really. The fact that he was groomed and he was in those positions, clearly they have big plans for him. That's gone out the window, and so have, other plans as well as a result. Sort of almost like a deck of cards has fell because of his injury.
What do you reckon, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, very, very clear, as Steve kind of alluded to, that he is, one of the guys they're most high on right now. He's a guy that's been pushed in quite hard ever since he really debuted, but certainly in the last few months, winning the Intercontinental title a couple of months back now, I think, and then, even winning that Battle Royal and being in the main event of the In Your House in July as well. Like, he's clearly maybe not number 2, number 3 babyface. Bret Hart's in that mix, Undertaker's sort of in that mix, but he's of the full-time guys, he might be the next guy behind Shawn. And clearly quite popular for a company that hasn't always done very well at getting over an African-American star. He is, in that slot, and seemingly was doing quite a good job. And I think, as you say, Rory, we spent months and months worrying about Ahmed Johnson injuring someone. Then along comes Ron Simmons, kicks him in the side, and that's it. Not ideal. I hope he's okay. But yeah, it's, I think when you're the WWF and when you're Vince McMahon, you've got this propensity to push such a small proportion of your overall audience. You can't really afford for one of your main half a dozen guys to go down injured, and it sounds like a lost army for a while.
Definitely. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that he was on a hot shot to the WWF title. I don't think it was going to be on the August 19th Raw, whoever that would have ended up being. Whether plans changed because of that injury, we don't know. We can discuss that a bit later on. But he would have been WWF champion very, very soon. He might not have taken it from Shawn, but he would have taken it from somebody. And I think that is why the WWF are making such a huge thing about this injury.
I could have seen him winning the 97 Royal Rumble.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and winning the title therefore at WrestleMania. Yep, I could see that happening. Absolutely, definitely. I think that would be, or would have been, quite the crowning achievement, and it would send out a very positive, powerful message as well. However, that doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon, although we don't have an over-under on his return. And as we stated earlier, the thing that makes it so important and why they are so high on him is that he was in play for both singles titles. He was Intercontinental Champion. They've had to hastily arrange a tournament for that one. And he had at least a TV shot at the WWF Championship. Would not have been his last one, I can guarantee you. So it just goes to show that they probably were, they wouldn't admit it, but putting all their eggs in one basket for this guy. And as Steve said, the House of Cards has come tumbling. It's very unfortunate. It's very sad. As you heard the interview just now, he's clearly desperately upset and clearly saddened about it. And it's a serious injury. I mean, something as simple, to want of a better word, than just a kick to the back should cause such a a devastating injury. It really does go to show. And for all our regular complaints and picking up of his faults, which I think are very much justified, I do hope that he comes back soon.
The monsters. They wear many masks in our world. Some are deranged, psychotic beings, unaware of the insanity that festers within. Others are brutal, ruthless assailants, executioners of a sinister plan. The monster slayers. They too are varied and unique. Shawn Michaels yields 200 pounds to the beast known as Vader. But he counters with guile, superb athleticism, and the courage of a gallant champion. And then there's the Undertaker, the mysterious light in a world of darkness. To exorcise the demon mankind, he cannot rely upon convention. In this cold, unforgiving battleground, he must embrace the horror to defeat it. For the monsters to be abolished, David must slay Goliath. The Reaper must claim another damned soul. But good doesn't always triumph over evil. Sometimes victory eludes heroics. Sometimes the horror lives on.
Okay, we are now going to move into the big event of the month, which was SummerSlam. Bob even, take us through what happened, mate.
It's been about 15 years since someone called me Rob. Bloody hell.
Little scamp that you are.
Yeah, sorry about that. All right. In the dark match, Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated Yokozuna onto the main card itself. That's probably free for all, actually. Main card itself, Owen Hart defeated Savio Vega. The Smoking Guns defeated the Body Donners, the New Rockers, and the Godwins in a 4-way tag team elimination match for the WWF tag team titles. Psycho Sid defeated the British Bulldog. Goldust defeated Mark Merrow. Jerry Lawler defeated Jake Roberts. Mankind defeated The Undertaker with Paul Bearer, not for much longer, in a Boiler Room Brawl. And in the main event, Shawn Michaels defeated Vader for the WWF Championship in a match that was restarted twice.
Steve, your thoughts on SummerSlam 1996?
For me, it was a card of one match, which was the main event. Everything else was pretty poor, including, I felt, the Boiler Room Brawl, which I know we'll talk about more. I know a lot of people quite enjoyed the Boiler Room Brawl. I didn't. And there was nothing else, no other match that you wouldn't have seen on one of the In Your House pay-per-views. This is meant to be the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, and it didn't feel like it until it was main event time. Really disappointing. Again, how much of it is because of Ahmed Johnson's injury? They had to change plans, but I mean, they didn't have to change every single match on the card. Some of the matches were already scheduled, and it was no different from from one of the sort of bi-monthly In Your House pay-per-views. There was nothing special about it until we got to the main event, which I absolutely loved, by the way. I thought the main event was great. It was a good main event, poor overall card.
Bob?
I don't know whether, me not, originally not being on the show at all and therefore not being in the mindset of having to sit down in front of SummerSlam and take a full set of notes, such as how late I kind of came to do this show. Maybe I was just in a bit more of a mindset of let's just sit here and pick holes in the show. But I thought it was the most bizarre 90 minutes of an opening pay-per-view I can recall in a very long time. But it was, as we saw in the opening package, it was a 2-match show. The final 2 matches were, 27 and 29 minutes. The Boiler Room Brawl, I kind of agree with Steve. I think there was just about enough going for it, and there was just about enough novelty value where they got away with it. But there was a lot of, just kind of quite gratuitous brawling. And there was also, shock, a lot of Mankind trying to kill himself. But, nobody's surprised there. In a thing that I think, Roy, was that pre-tape, that Boiler Room Brawl it was, wasn't it?
Yep, all the Boiler Room segments took place the day before the event.
That's right. And then the main event, it's weird, I quite like the booking that they did, but I kind of felt it actually kind of affected the match in that the story they tried to tell was really quite good, but I kind of felt like it impacted on Vader and Shawn really having a good match. Yeah, weird ass card though, and barely saved by the final 2 matches.
Let's just sit here and pick holes. Are you new here, Bob?
Well, I have to be a bit more impartial when I put together the full notes. I have to pay attention. I can't just sit there and go that shit.
You don't want to hear what I've got to say then.
There were a couple of matches on this card where I was very much just doing that.
Yes, absolutely. And even if I've been handed the card before watching this event, I can pretty much guess what they are, and when we get to them, we'll prove it was right. For 2 hours, I was completely zoned out. I'm with you, Steve. This didn't feel like SummerSlam at all.
No, not at all. No. But the thing which was a bit strange, I don't know whether you sort of agree with this, but did the WWF have shares in the Gund Arena? Did they put money into the Gund Arena? We seem to have like a Gund Arena tribute at the beginning of the show. You know, what was that all about?
I think I'm right in saying that I think you could be right there. The Gund Arena was only recently built, I want to say, off the top of my head. Maybe WWF had some percentage points in there. I can't confirm that at this point, but
yeah, it seemed that way, didn't it? You know, they seem to be really sort of like quite proud of the fact that, you know, yeah, we're here at the Gund Arena and the Gund. It's, you know, right, okay, great, brilliant.
I think they were just clinging to relevance, weren't they? They were just trying to.
Yeah. And it was a very impressive setting. I mean, there's 18,000 there, and the first camera pan shot was fantastic.
Yeah, it was huge, wasn't it? Yeah.
This is SummerSlam. But it took 2 hours for me to remember that it was watching SummerSlam. There were irrelevant matches with very little going on, with even less riding on them, with even less further actually happening in them. The WWF themselves were clearly only concerned about the final 2 matches, and by and large the crowd were as well. We'll get to that. Those final 2 matches, and I think we've already proved it a little bit here, I think the phrase split opinion is going to be coming up quite a lot when these ones are discussed. Boiler Room Brawl was a happening, as dear old Gorilla would say. Whether it was something I want to see happen again is another story. And the main event, I'm with you, Bob, it was hampered by the booking. Some of the work that the two of them did was magnificent, but the thing I remember about the event now is the fact that the match was restarted twice, and that's really not how it should be, in my opinion. But we will get there when we get there. Just very briefly about the free-for-all. There's very little to discuss. Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated Yokozuna in less than 2 minutes after Yoko went for a banzai drop and he pulled the top rope off. Do you think they're trying to tell you something, Rodney? And there was also a beach bikini something that took place, which the various lovely ladies of the WWF walking around in bikinis and hanging around in a big swimming pool. I thought you described it. It was obviously backstage. It didn't exactly look like Beverly Hills. You know, there was bits of corrugated iron and people walking around behind them, which ended after T.O. Hopper rescued a chocolate bar, inverted commas, from the bottom of the pool. WWF humour, eh?
I feel like I've really missed out as in this free-for-all.
What else would possibly compel you to buy a pay-per-view that comedy like that? I know, nothing. Bit of soft pornography, bit of comedy, there you go, I'm in, take my money. And if you have done that, you would be greeted by a very impressive black and white video package. Again, talking about the first 2 matches, might as well be the first 2 matches. The final 2 matches, because they were the only ones worth bothering about. The key line here from these, from our voiceover man, is David must beat Goliath, and the Reaper must claim another damn soul. As I said earlier, we get a camera pan of the arena, which looks very, very impressive. On commentary, we've got Vince, JR, and Mr. Perfect. Savio Vega's music kicks into a very tepid reaction. Owen Hart gets a very noticeable pop. He is still selling that arm injury when trying to hold his Slammy Award. JR's line, he could have had a bone marrow transplant by now. So out of nowhere, we get our first match, which is Savio Vega versus Owen Hart. Vince McMahon draws attention to the absence from ringside of Jim Cornette. More on that in a sec. Owen tries to hit Savio with his car straight away, but Tim White stops him. A decent-sized Owen chant goes up at this point. Savio rams Owen's arm into the buckles a few times and locks in an armbar. Both guys miss dives, and then we get a picture-in-picture of Cornette geeing up Vader for his title match, which I think is a really good touch. Savio is still holding an armbar at this point. Bring along something to read. After a monkey flip, he does the same again. He finally decides to do something different with a roll-up for 2, but he then does the Ken Patera charge to the ring post, and Owen mercifully takes control. He actually works Savio's arm with some great dungeon-approved holds, including a beautiful divorce court, which gets him a 2 count. Savio tries to bite his way out of another hold, but Owen ties his arm around the top 2 ropes. Clarence Mason walks down to ringside. Savio misses a spin kick, but hits a body press. Owen rallies after this, and then hits what a manoeuvre by Owen Hart, which we all call an enziguri, Vince. He gets 2 off that one. He then goes for the flare pin and gets 2 there. And the same again from that beautiful leg lariat that he does. He then hits a sidewalk. Savio then hits a sidewalk slam for 2. Owen counters with the really getting behind him. He hits a wonderful missile drop kick and gets 2.999. He then teases a moonsault, but sadly Savio breaks it up. He goes for a side suplex, but as he lands, he hits his head on Owen's cast. Owen takes off his cast and whacks Savio in the head with it. I mean, right in front of Tim White. How he missed that, I do not know. Savio is then knocked down. So what does Owen do? He puts him in the sharpshooter, of course. JR says, you don't need to do that. Owen then gets a stoppage victory, and the crowd cheer him to the rafters. And you know what? Quite right too. Clarence Mason then joins Owen Hart in the ring to celebrate. Before we finish this, Justin Hawk Bradshaw comes out, and he shouts at Vince that he will send Vega, and I quote, back to that island. He then clubbers Savio Vega in the aisleway as we fade to black. Your thoughts on this one, Bob?
Owen Hart's meant to have a wrist injury, right? It's wrist or lower arm, correct?
I think it's wrist.
I think it's wrist too. So why in the first 5 minutes of this match was Savio Vega working the shoulder and the tricep?
Because Savio Vega? Otherwise I've got nothing.
I mean, like, I know the idea is that, well, the audience is simple enough. Savio work his arm, but you've got to work the bit of the arm that's actually meant to be hurt. I mean, we know it's not, but that's the gimmick. He works a load of, kind of arm wrenches which work the shoulder, and then he got into the mat and he bent his arm back and pulled, kind of stretched out the tricep. That was the idea there. And I'm thinking, okay, I think his shoulder's fine. I think his tricep's fine. What about his wrist? And point number 2, I have 3 in this one. Point number 2 was Savio Vega is one of the most boring, technically correct wrestlers I have ever watched.
Gotcha.
Despite being perfectly well trained, he offers absolutely nothing as a wrestler for me anyway. And point number 3, Owen Hart's wearing a cast. We're assuming the cast is a legal weapon during the match. So 1, why would it be an illegal shot? And 2, how would it hurt more than hitting with a cast and it on his arm? He takes the cast off. It's just a hollow bit of, plasterboard, whatever you want to call it. Plaster of Paris, whatever it is. It takes the cast off and then hits Savio over the head. Why not just hit him in the head? Surely the cast across your arm will cause more impact than the cast on its own. The ref's looking at this and doesn't call a DQ, so obviously it's legal. And then, this was very much me in fucking hell. What's going on with this show? I can't enjoy it so far, and there are a couple of other matches that are like this too.
Bob, why didn't Owen just use a shoe?
What you mean? And take it off and load it like Raven does?
Yes, but that would be all three promotions then using shoe gimmicks. One is more than enough, thanks. Steve, what do you reckon?
Maybe it was a loaded cast. They never made that clear. He should have. There was something built into the cast. Maybe they need to make it clear. I think, but clearly they've got big plans for Owen. I think based on this match, based on the reaction, based on
Savio Vega.
No. Well, yeah. Forget about that. Forget. The reaction he got from the crowd, the fact that Mason now is getting, are we going to maybe have a splinter group? Is Mason going to maybe take Owen and the Bulldog? Have they got big plans for Owen, do you think? Do you think maybe, we want to mention that Bret might come back sooner rather than later? Do we get a Bret Owen round 2 or not? I just felt that maybe they were Owen. They're putting him up there, I think, and whether it's for a face turn or whether it's for putting him into the next sort of bracket of superstar. What do you think of that?
I'd be all over that, quite frankly. I think the crowd are ready for an Owen face turn. I don't see it happening at this point, I've got to be honest. I think the crowd were just getting behind Owen because he's so damn good in the ring, quite frankly. But
yeah, true. And as we say, Vegas, just like a sponge, when it comes to charisma. And the other great thing I loved about this was at the end where the referee raised Owen's arm, and he raised the arm with the cast on, and Owen sort of winced and said, "Oh, watch my arm," just selling the injury to the end. I loved that. I thought that was a great touch.
Owen is a master of the particular heel role he plays. The thing I like about Owen, the character, is he's not the sort of person who would steal your dinner money, but if he found out your dinner money was stolen, he would rib you about it in the dinner queue every day for a month. That's what I like about him. And plus the fact he's a damn awesome worker as well. And yes, you both alluded to it, and you're quite right. I mean, I could be the most despicable heel who couldn't work a lick. I'd be cheered over Savio Vega, I'd like to think.
Yeah.
He brings nothing but spin kicks, and even they look quite rubbish. Because I think the crowd were there, they were hot, they wanted to see some good wrestling, and that Owen Hart is going to bring that. I get the thing we're going to be talking about this quite a lot as the months go on. I talked about it in the WCW show last month. This was a broomstick match, and Owen got 3 stars out of a broomstick who can do a
3 stars?
3 stars all. Would you go high?
Out of how many numbers?
Call it Owen Hart bias if you will. If I was giving it for Owen Hart, I'd probably just give it 5 stars because I'm a complete mark for the guy. Nothing much to talk about, but I hope that they, even if they don't out and out turn him face, that the powers that be listen to the pop that Owen Hart got. Let him be the man in the ring we can be. Put him in with someone. We talked about that a few months ago. Give him a B pay-per-view run with Shawn. That's 2 pay-per-view main events which will both be cracking. Just don't waste him with scrubs like Savio. He'll do his best in there.
I think it's pretty clear they don't see that much.
No, they don't. He's a mechanic. He's a good hand. And it really does pain me to say it. It gives me an awful pain in my wrist, actually. But I just don't see him going beyond mid-card level, and that is a bloody shame. Speaking of bloody shame, here's Todd Pettengill. He is in a totally freaky boiler room. We hopefully learn that, and I direct quote, "There are things in there." Ooh, scary. He finds Mankind, who tells us there is no place like home. Take this simple warning, dead man. Do not come in here. We go back to the ring for the Tag Team Championship 4-team elimination match between the champions, the Smoking Guns, the Godwins, the Body Donners, and the new and improved Rockers, as we must now call them. During the Godwins' introduction, Vince actually shouts, "Suey, where's your dignity, man?" He then says this, the greatest non sequitur I think I've ever heard. This is, again, a verbatim quote. "The hogs are squealing. It must be SummerSlam." But of course, Vinny. But of course. Okay. 2 men start, and once contact has been made, they can tag anyone they choose. Once one man on the team gets eliminated, the whole team is out. We start off with Billy Gunn and Henry Godwin. Other than that Henry Godwin wheelbarrow slam, nothing else happens until we get to it against Phineas. Both babyfaces, of course, so what do? They, of course, tag a member of the Guns each. So Billy supposedly has to face Bart. The babyfaces jump off the apron to prevent them tagging, and then Sip just walks back up onto the apron so Bart can tag him. Well, that was a bit pointless. Zip then gets pinned after Jannetty trips him on the outside. Yep, that got a 3 count. So there go the Donners. I should say that Skip was legitimately injured at this point. He was wearing a neck brace, but they could have found a better elimination than that. Leif Cassidy gets in. He works on Henry. Marty Jannetty then tags in and he dominates. A lot of quick-fire tags at this point. Leif then accidentally clotheslined Billy. The Rockers then accidentally hit Billy again after that. Henry gives Marty a slop drop and he's gone. So we are down to the Godwins versus the Guns. I think we all knew that was going to happen. We get a double down after Henry clotheslined Bart. Another fantastic line on commentary from JR. "The Godwins' biggest fan, Bill Clinton, is celebrating his birthday today, Vince." Vince completely no-sells that one. Billy in, he calls Henry a big sissy. Ooh, zing. We then get tons more heel tags, and again, absolutely nothing happens, and the crowd don't give a toss. They briefly perk up when Henry hits a desperation power slam. He then gets the mild tag, Phineas in with his crap offense and that stupid mule kick. He gives Billy the slop drop and goes for the 3 count, but the ref is distracted by Hillbilly Jim trying to stop Sonny. While this is going on, Bart hits a forearm off the top, Billy covers, the ref turns around, and gets the 3 count. The Smoking Guns retain. Absolute shite. What do you reckon, Steve?
Yeah, absolute shite. It was garbage. The rules for this match were just ridiculous. And why the Guns? I mean, could they not just have pinned each other? I don't know. Maybe they would have lost the titles to... I don't know how that would have worked.
That's what we were supposed to think. But
yeah, but it's just stupid, and it's just, it's poorly sort of thought through, poorly laid out. These elimination matches, when they're like this and they're not properly sort of laid out and presented, as you say, the body done a skip, he had an injury, but why is it in these type of situations the weakest of moves results in a pin? It's just like, a hit from behind, 1, 2, 3, it's out. So they're never really sort of laid out quite well. And there was a bit on commentary where Vince says that Jannetty was a former tag champion with Shawn Michaels. I don't think this has ever been acknowledged before on WWF TV. I didn't think. I mean, I left my history sort of. I'm trying to sort of think back, but I don't think we ever had that on TV, did we? The Rockers winning the tag belt, but Vince has said it now. Has that now become part of the record books? I don't know.
It's probably we all forgot.
Yeah.
That tag team match, if he's referring to the one I think he is, that match, that 2 out of 3 falls against the Hart Foundation.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever televised, was it?
Never aired on television.
No.
The rope broke.
Exactly, yeah. But you know what? Again, Vince, he seems to be a bit all over the place on commentary during the whole event. But this sort of line which he added was a bit strange, and he had a couple of times like that during the show. I don't know, but anyway, the tag match was garbage, and the quicker out of the way, the better, really.
Totally agree, Bob.
To read you a slightly protracted version of my notes from this match, and this is what you get from me when I don't have to actually write down what happens. I've got the following: crossovers are shit, tag rules are stupid. Why are all these teams so awful? I'd say the Rockers deserve more if they weren't so awful. Crowd is dead. Distraction finish. Sigh. That is basically a summation of my thoughts on this match.
Beautiful.
Just horrendous. Like. It might not win match of the year. It probably shouldn't. There have been worse. But it needs to be in the discussion. And all the teams are so bad. Just I don't know if I even feel sorry for Al Snow. Like, they're all so bad. You all kind of deserve each other. And you kind of, not that WCW haven't got their own faults with the tag team division. It's like the Steiners, Harlem Heat, Luger and Sting, the Nasty Boys, the Public Enemy. Properly decent tag teams. At least tag teams that have some redeeming features. And this shower of shit comes out. I'd have beaten them all and then just never shown any of the teams on TV again.
Do you think this is the worst it's ever been in the tag division?
I don't think I'll be watching long enough to know, but it's never been great. I mean, never in the time we've been doing the show.
You think about Men on a Mission, they were pretty poor, but this now, this is poor, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, since the Quebecers went, the Quebecers were quite good.
Okay, in the ring.
Since they went, we've kind of chucked together some tea. Yeah, it's been shit, hasn't it? It's just horrendous. We'll come on to the post-match stuff in a sec, because there's a promo that I think Rory will get to, and there's also a very, very bizarre video that airs after this too that we'll come on to. But there's, when they did the promo at the end, I was convinced the new team were going to debut. I was convinced. I thought, tag team, 4-way match. If you're going to have the one team that they're already champions win a 4-way elimination match, particularly their heels, you do it, and then you debut someone new, don't you?
Yeah,
isn't that the idea? Otherwise, this is the match you change the titles on. And then nothing happened. And then we, possibly the low point of the show, and there were a few, the video that aired after this match, what the fuck was that?
Oh, we'll get to it. What? Just, quite simply. I know we have a lot of our fellow contributors are big fans of tag team wrestling. If they are still fans of tag team wrestling after watching this, then they've got the patience of a saint.
I was going to say, Craig was meant to be on this show. I don't think he'd have saved this.
We'll give him a couple of hours to see if he can wax lyrical about this one at some point. But this was diabolical. cowboys against farmers, against people who like keeping fit, against 70s throwbacks who like watching the Partridge Family. Is that kind of what we're talking about here? Please take my money. This was just appalling, and it didn't even have the natural ending. I'll say all of them just, fucking off would have been an ending I would have been happy with, but I thought the Godwins were at least going to win here. I mean, do you put the heels over again? I mean, where do you go with the Smoking Guns being the champion? Okay, where do you go with the Godwins being the champion? I admit, it's...
Imagine a match where the Godwins winning is better than what happened.
That's what we've come to. And so, technically, well, there wasn't really much going on, so you can't really give this... I'm with you, Bob. I don't think this will be in the worst match of the year stakes, probably because I just want to forget about it. It wasn't even funny bad. It was just awful. Emphasising on your second biggest pay-per-view of the year how utterly bereft your tag team division is. And they have to look at this seriously, just get the belts off the Guns. I don't know what they're going to do for them, but what other tag teams are there? I mean, the Smoking Guns, they could be the champions forever, which is a rather sobering thought. I love sobering thoughts. It was them that got me drinking. We've now got some fantastic post-match stuff coming up here. One bit in the ring and one bit on VT. Sunny grabs the mic after a no doubt unintentional camera shot of her knickers, and she announces our winners. She rags on fat, out-of-shape women in the audience, so she is going to give us a generous gift. It turns out to be a huge centerfold picture of her, which we see in front of the hard camera. I would say it's somewhere between PG and TV-14 level, so use your imagination. JR thinks she needs a trip to the woodshed. That's one way of putting it, Jim. Take a syllable, maybe. Then we cut back to, I believe, Bob, this is what you were talking about. We then get footage, and I swear, if you haven't seen it, I'm not making this up. We get footage of a race to the arena between the Godwins in a rapid train and the Smoking Guns, who, of course, are in a horse-driven cart. The Godwins get to the arena first. I have written in my notes, what the hell was the point of that? Any ideas, Bob?
Well,
after them. Oh.
Exactly. That was my big problem. Like, forget how stupid the whole thing was, and forget who gives a fuck. But why didn't it before the match at least?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Exactly.
But what? Like a race to the arena? Like how would a horse and cart possibly be a train? Like what's it like? Oh, I don't know.
Nobody knows.
But the fact that they were in a horse and cart rather than just on horses, made them even look even more ridiculous. The Smoking Guns, at least put them just on horses, on horseback, and then just cut to them arriving late. But the fact that they were in a horse and cart
shouldn't the Godwin family have been on tractors?
Yep, that's exactly what I put in my notes underneath here. What's their gimmick? Why would they be in a train? And what were the Smoking Guns? What were they going to do in a horse-driven cart? Were they going to try and, ram the train off the rails?
It was more interesting than the match.
Oh yeah, it was and all. I think we've actually we've almost done the impossible here. We've actually managed to find some humour in WWF comedy. So I suppose in that respect we have to give them some grudging props. But oh my goodness, and that's not all from this VT. We see Jerry Lawler playing some baseball with the Cleveland Indians. He wants to know how to throw the spitball. The Indians tell him that's an illegal throw. Oh, naughty, naughty Lawler. And because of that, he's punished by sitting up in the cheap seats during the Cleveland Indians match later. What a bad, bad man he is. Rather funnily, we then get to see various superstars, both faces and heels, covering up a graffitied wall. And I've written down here, I would love to know what it actually said. I could think of a few things. And just to cap this ludicrous bit of VT, another direct quote from Todd Pettingill for you during one of the fan conventions, I believe this was, and I quote, "The Undertaker and Paul Bearer give away a funeral." Ooh, me first.
They should have gone celebrating that he'd won it.
And guess what, mate? You get your prize now. Oh my goodness. Can we talk about a match now?
Yes,
we might be a while, but yeah, we can.
I can't bring myself to comment on any of this. Just draw your own conclusions, listeners, please. As the next match is Sid versus a British Bulldog, but you take what you can in this world. We hear Rule Britannia as Davey Boy is on his way. For those keeping score, he is actually announced as being from Manchester this time. And again, no Jim Cornette. Doc interviews Sid, who just shouts incoherently, but everybody loves him for it. He eventually comes out and the crowd bay for him. He helpfully tells us to the camera, but 2 men enter, 1 man survives. And we are in with Sid versus the British Bulldog. The bell rings to a big USA chant. Davey gets knocked out by a big clothesline, followed by a body slam. He nips outside for a breather, while Sid milks the crowd again, the big ham. Back in with a standing side headlock. A very long standing side headlock. A very, very long standing side headlock. Sort of power slam, then gets 2 that looked a bit awkward. Davey's excellent vertical suplex follows. Clarence Mason is here once again. And now it's Davey's turn to hit the chin lock. Sid gets clotheslined out as we again see a picture-in-picture of Vader warming up for his title match later. A front suplex onto the ropes also gets a 2 count. Yet more chin locks. Sid rallies with a corner charge, but he tries again and misses. Davey hits the running power slam, but he doesn't go for the cover because he's distracted by Jim Cornette, who has come out at ringside to berate Clarence Mason. After that, he decides to hit another power slam, but Sid, of course, gets out of it, pushed him into the buckles, hits a choke slam, hits a huge, and I mean huge, power bomb, and that gets the 3. Steve?
I've got a real soft spot for Big Sid, I've got to say, but he shouldn't be in matches that go beyond sort of 3 minutes. You know, he should just be in sort of squash matches, really. Luckily, Smith gets us, you know, I'm not even going to say reasonable. Smith managed to get a match out of him. You know, he does all the heavy lifting, quite literally at some points. But it's all about Sid, the big comeback, the choke slam, and as you said, the huge power bomb, and the crowd just absolutely love him. A bit of a come down for Smith, considering, you know, he's sort of recently been challenging for the title not long ago, but I don't think it's going to harm him too much. This was all about Sid, and then about Cam Cornette, and as we said before, you know, Clarence Mason, what's happening there with Davey Boy and Owen Hart and stuff like that. But as I say, got a big soft spot for Sid. The match was awful, but it could have been a lot worse. Luckily, he was in there with Davey Boy.
It was the best match on the show so far. I didn't hate this. It wasn't very good. It wasn't very long. But I like big guys wrestling. Davey Boy is just about good enough to get a just about serviceable enough 6-minute match out of Sid. And I quite admire the choke slam and then the power bomb. So yeah, just about enough going for it.
That's pretty much it, isn't it? It was if it had been even 5 seconds longer, I think it would have been too long. We just got enough of everything from these guys that I think we want to see. But the sheer staggering overness of Sid is almost worth an extra point in its own right. I mean, I know you guys tried to come to terms with it last month, and you had a pretty damn good stab at it. I've been thinking ever since I watched this event, they just love the bloody guy. He's just an absolute cheer magnet, and he's got 2 moves.
It wasn't quite on the level of last month.
No, possibly not, but
he got Hero's reaction on Raw last month. He didn't get Hero's reaction when he came out.
I'll give you that, but and I suppose he did have to encourage them to cheer this time, but cheer they did when he did. The crowd still love him, and I would imagine he's going to be moving up the card with a clean win like this. I'm with you, Steve. I'm a bit worried about Bulldog, though. I mean, 2 months ago, in both the May and June pay-per-views, he was main eventing for the title against Shawn Michaels, and this was part of a main event storyline as well. And here he's losing to Sid in 6 minutes in the middle of the card. On the Battle Royal, which Ahmed Johnson won on Raw a couple of weeks ago, he was the first man eliminated. He was eliminated by a punch by Ahmed after 30 seconds. So his stock is pretty low at this point, which is worrying. I know he's at time of recording, I don't think he's quite sorted out his contract situation, which might explain why he's getting a bit of a kicking at the moment. But still a fine worker, still does what he needs to in the ring, and Sid got the win that everybody wanted him to, so we can move on without too many complaints with a match that was serviceable, was never going to be anything other but serviceable, but was Flair Steamboat compared to what we've had so far. We're now going to move to Wildman Mark Romero versus Goldust. And we get some footage from Superstars of Mankind spooking out Sable, calling her Mommy. We get a brief interview with Mero telling us that for Goldust, it is time to put up or shut up. Very importantly, JR tells us we might see a new move from Mark Mero today, and it's called the Wild Thing. While my Mark Mero versus Goldust, then, our standard fare to start until Mero hits a few arm drags. He tries to get the crowd going, and he is met with absolute crickets. Clubbering rights from Goldust until Mero hits a rolling press for 2, then holds on to an arm bar, as if we haven't seen enough of those today already. This also goes on for a long time, and the crowd do not give a stuff. Goldust hits that weird flat back punch thing he does, and then Mero gets backdropped over the top rope. And Goldust punches Mero off the apron onto the guardrail, then he slams him down on it. I'm back in the ring with a clothesline, then Mankind staggers down to ringside. Sable freaks out as Mankind puts the moves on her, again calling her mommy. Mankind is then blocked off by officials and he runs off back down the aisleway. Back to the ring with Goldust dominating with what I will charitably call methodical offense. Mero rallies with a flying butt bump off the second rope. A diving clothesline and knee lift look nice, but still, nobody cares. They barely come alive the crowd for a 10 punch in the corner. Mero, for the want of something better to do, Goldust just knocked out of the ring and Mero hits a cannonball. That looked nice. Back in the ring for a top rope leg drop and a body slam. Now, here we go. Mark Mero goes up top. Briefly, the crowd are actually interested, and he hits a shooting star press. A very nice one, and the commentary team tell us that will be the Wild Thing. So that gets the win, right? No, because the ref is distracted by Marlena, because reasons, and so when eventually he comes around to make the pin, it only gets 2. Mero then hits a power slam for 2. Then, out of nowhere, Goldust just sort of push Mero to the buckles, and hits a curtain call, and that gets the 3 count. What? Afterwards, Sable tends to Mero. Then Goldust gets on all fours and he starts to do some beckoning to Sable. He goes to kiss her, I think. Then Mero recovers and sends him out of the ring with a drop kick. Steve, if you're going to promote a match, broadly speaking, based on the fact that we are going to see a big move, why the hell does that big move not finish the thing?
Well, you say it was quite a nice move, you know. The shooting star press was good. I think it was made. It looked a lot better because it was in the WWF ring, I think, as well. But the minute he didn't get the pin on that, you knew he wasn't going to win the match. You just thought, well, what is happening here now? And as you say, Jim, you know, good old JR sort of built it up in the before the match started. Bizarre, really, really strange, because up until that point, you know, Mero hadn't really done much wrong, you know. It's a bit sloppy, you know, but it just didn't make any sense. And as you say, you know, they made a big deal about this move. It's the first time I think we've seen it in the WWF ring. Bizarre, strange.
He has definitely done a shooting star press as Johnny B. Bad. At the top of my head, I think he did it in that terrific half-an-hour match with Brian Pillman back at Full Brawl last year. But I can't think of any other occurrence of anybody in the WWF has actually done this, so
no.
I was glad to see it, but it's got to win the match, surely. Bob?
Yeah, they're all getting this top rope move thing wrong, aren't they? Yeah, we see it with Too Cold Scorpio and ECW. We're seeing it more and more with the Cruiserweight division in WCW, and we're starting to see it here. Like, I don't get it. Like, you know, Randy Savage went to the top with his elbow drop and won the match. When Vader goes to the top with his moonsault, if he hits it, he wins the match. You know, wrestling's dangerous enough as it is. Don't kill yourself going off the top rope if you're not going to win the fucking match, surely. It was alright, wasn't it? You know, I was kind of praying for the release of Death when Mankind came out at this stage in the show. That never quite came. And yeah, like, Goldust feels flat, and they've beaten Mero so much that he feels flat. I don't really care about either of these two.
Me neither. I think Mero in particular is really struggling at this point. He just hasn't got started in the WWF. Had a couple of nice matches, that great match against Austin at King of the Ring, but he's just a guy with a very attractive wife and a couple of flashy moves. I mean, say what you will about Johnny B. Bad, and I did when I've been on WCW podcasts in the past, but at least it was something. I mean, here he's just a wild man. He's not
even that, is he? He's not even a wild man.
It's only a moustache, you know. But that shooting star press, I say this till the cows come home. Even if the commentary team hadn't made any talk about it beforehand, that's still got to win the match. I want to believe when I'm watching that high-risk manoeuvres are high risk for a reason. Risk versus reward. Yes, you could miss it, but if you hit it, it's going to pay serious dividends, i.e. your opponent ain't kicking out. And yes, they protected it to a degree by having the ref being distracted, but come on. It's about the only thing in this match that the crowd cared about as well. It's just, the gift horse was in the mouth and they just looked right at it. Goldust, I agree with you, Bob. The bloom is coming off the rose with him, I think. I'm not really sure they know what to do with him at this point. We've almost come full circle with him now. We were this time last year, that he's now just Dustin Rhodes in a gold jumpsuit. They're going to need to do something with him. If
Dustin Rhodes worked better matches than these.
Yes, I agree.
Well, I know they were both predominantly baby faces, but I assure you go through those Saturday Night archives, you'd find a better match than this between these two.
Agree totally, and they're both in danger. And with the roster being as it is at the moment, being fairly slim, WWF can't afford to have their, I'll call them this, their mid-carders as flat and meaningless as this. It's a bad sign. I should say we'll barely talk about the match. The match itself really was just there, and if you went for popcorn, you missed nothing. Gee, it's going well, this isn't it? Right, okay, so we then get some clips of Ahmed's interview on Raw last week, and yet another recap on the injury to his ruptured kidney. Ahmed calls the IC belt, which is now vacated, the People's title, and that he understands the decision made by Gorilla Monsoon to strip him of it. He doesn't care what the doctors say, he will come back to wrestling. There's going to be a sudden death battle royal between Sid, Austin, Goldust and Savio for the WWF title shot. That takes place on Raw the day after this show. We kill some more time with an in-ring interview with Farouk and Sonny. He says he should be given the Intercontinental title right now. Nothing else of note. Sonny just calls Farouk the next WWF Intercontinental Champion, and what Sonny wants, Sonny gets. Video package for Jerry Lawler against Jake the Snake Roberts. Oh boy. We learned that Jake the Snake Roberts' problems were so bad that he wanted to die. The counterpoint of that is Jerry Lawler cutting his awful 1950s-style gags about Jake's drinking. A terrible, terrible juxtaposition of reality and fantasy. And believe me, it gets a whole lot worse. Before the match, US Olympian weightlifter Mark Henry is introduced to the crowd, who don't really care. That might have something to do with the fact he comes out to Lex Luger's old music. Will they never learn? Mark Henry joins us on commentary, and he contributes absolutely nothing. Lawler comes down to ringside, brandishing a large bag over his shoulder. He gets some cheap heat with the Baltimore Ravens jersey and cuts his usual, yeah, whatever, dad promo. He opens the bag, which contains 2 bottles of Jim Beam. Thankfully, Jake's awesome music kicks in quite quickly. Lawler grabs the mic again, opens his bag, and it's a big bottle of champagne. Jake opens his. It's, of course, Revelations. He dumps them onto Lawler, who then scarpers. The bell rings, but before we get the match, Lawler grabs the mic again. He brandishes the Jim Beam as a peace offering, but the mic fails. Small mercies. Jake punches him and he runs him into the steps. Kicks him in the bollocks and then slams him on the outside. After an initial flurry of interest, the crowd don't really care because they just want to see a DDT at this point. Lawler throws a fan's drink at Jake and ties him in the ropes. He grabs the Jim Beam, but Jake kicks him away. Jake goes for the DDT, but Lawler slowly backdrops him out of it. That looked rubbish. Jake hits a short arm clothesline to set up for another DDT, but Lawler grabs Harvey Whippleman, the referee. This distraction allows the King to grab the Jim Beam bottle, jab Jake in the throat with it, hook the tights, and get the win after a long, long 3 count. After that absolute tripe, Lawler gets the mic again. His throat's dry. He needs a drink. He opens the Jim Beam bottle and pours it down Jake's throat. Vince calls it raw booze, which I've never heard that expression, never mind. As Lawler grabs a second bottle, Henry eventually gets up and grabs it off him. He scares Lawler back down the aisle, and this appalling charade ends with Jake Roberts dry heaving. Bob, talk to me.
We didn't reference the Ahmed promo. We didn't speak about it. I didn't understand that for a kickoff in the sense that I don't know why they didn't just do, the Farouk promo. I don't understand why they didn't do a Farouk match against somebody else.
Yep.
Because God knows they could have done with it. But they decided that we were going to follow a flat match between Goldust and Mark Merrow with a promo for Farouk Assad, which was pretty irrelevant. And then follow that with another really long and really irrelevant promo from Lawler. And usual shit, okay, no better, no worse. And then a match nobody really cares about. And another finish that was like, what was that? But my kind of main take was, who is more irrelevant in 1996, Lawler or Duggan?
Oh my goodness me.
I like Duggan, but it's close.
I think I've talked about Jim Duggan twice since I joined the podcast, and neither time have I been particularly complimentary, apart from what we will now call that promo last month. For better or worse, the crowds do seem to like chanting along USA with him. Lawler is, well, that's something, I guess. It's a cheap pop, but it's a cheap pop. But Lawler's heat is dirt cheap. It's decades out of date. I mean, he's still doing the I hate your sport team thing. That doesn't work on television. People watching around the Western world are going to agree with you. Oh, just awful. Sorry, carry on, Bob, before
I don't have a lot more to add, really. The match was, God, this show's a lot worse when I remember it. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, Roberts is pretty relevant in 96. I mean, I know people like him. I know he used to be over. But, you know, this is the new generation, isn't it? And the third match from the top is, you know, two guys that were probably peaking at the end of the 70s, early 80s. Roberts maybe a bit later, but close.
And it's third from the top on their second biggest pay-per-view of the year. Think on. Steve?
Well, things were that bad that the King had to start his own Burger King chant.
Yes.
At one point, the crowd just were absolutely silent, and you almost felt sorry for him a little bit, where he had to sort of turn to the crowd and say, you know, don't you dare start that Burger King stuff. Oh, right, okay, yeah, sorry, we better start the Burger King stuff. It was that bad.
It was a polite Burger King chant, let's be honest.
Yeah. Alarm bells rang when Mark Henry was sort of laughing at the King's jokes on commentary. I thought, oh, that's not great, is it? No, this wasn't good at all. You know, Lawler's, 45? You know, Roberts is certainly in his 40s. You know, we've got, as he says, it's meant to be the new generation. We've got cruiserweights on WCW. We've got ECW just turning down the house now. This is not good. This is not a good, you know, advertisement for what the Federation should be all about in 1996. And as you say, the gags, you know, are beyond cheap. And in fact, that, you know, the fact that he ended up with 2 bottles of Jim Beam when obviously one of them should have been a bottle of JD, the whole thing was just god awful, wasn't it?
Booty Man, DDP, Ultimate Warrior, Goldust, Steve McMichael, Joe Gomez. You boys took a hell of a beating.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that DDP match was...
Yeah. Not just because of what I'm going to... Again, I've used the word charitably quite a lot in this hour, but I'm going to charitably called the action. It isn't just about that. It's everything this match represented. I'm all for heels getting heat. And I don't care whether or not Jake agreed to do this. You're out and out... Making fun is making fun. Out and out mocking somebody's very, very real problems in the context of a wrestling match, not just the promos, actually in the match, I think is hideous. Absolutely hideous. They did not need to go there. Now, I don't know why they're doing this, because I agree, Jake has got very little to offer in 1996. There's no doubt about that, none at all. But they do at least have a semblance of some kind of feel-good story they can tell with him. And unless he gets his comeuppance against Lawler here, and I've got to be honest, I don't see that happening, then this is just absolute mean-spirited, bordering on cruel. So a match which itself was awful was made 1,000 times worse. And I absolutely loathe this. I loathe everything I saw. I loathe everything everything it represented. To try and end on a lighter note, a slightly lighter note, the fact that Lawler thought he had a bottle of JD and it was another bottle of Jim Beam. Now, okay, I've never been a road agent. I don't know exactly what their jobs are. Checking the heel has the correct bottles of drink in his bag. I'm sure that's really high up on the list of things you need to do.
Surely you should have asked Roberts.
Oh. Bob, today, man, I tell you.
Just let that linger. Yeah.
I think what's more scary than anything else is Jake didn't get the win, which means we're probably going to see this again.
God, the finish of this match. I mean, the match wasn't so bad. I think we would have made a bigger deal out of it.
Number 1 and 2 positions for worst match of the year are coming up. But yeah, so this show just keeps on, if anyone's still listening at this point, this show keeps on rolling with my contender for worst match of the year. We see footage of Bob Backlund campaigning in the crowd. They respond pretty much as you would expect. We then get a video package for the Boiler Room Brawl, and this is really, really well done. It plays up the fact that this goes further than even the most personal of feuds. The exact words used are beyond earthly limits. Undertaker's music strikes up, but it's Paul Bearer coming to the ring, and he has the urn in his hands. To win the match, you have to emerge from the Boiler Room and take possession of the urn. Before we start, as we intimated earlier, the Boiler Room portion of this match was actually recorded the day before the pay-per-view. It was only the in-arena stuff which took place live. I've got to say that I think the WWF did do a pretty good editing job on that, but not on something else, as we will get to very, very shortly. Here is the Boiler Room Brawl between Undertaker and Mankind. We see the Undertaker walking down a corridor and finds the door helpfully marked Boiler Room. He enters it and he looks around for Mankind for ages. After what feels like a lifetime, Mankind emerges from behind and whacks him with a 2x4. The commentary team go dead at this point, and they will remain so. And as such, I am going to eschew play-by-play for a while. Basically, and this sounds a bit glib, but it's true, they hit each other with stuff for a long time. And it's so dark, we can't even see what's happening. Now, bearing in mind what I said earlier, on our screens we get some transmission difficulties. Now, these are obviously just there for integrity preservation. The fans watching on monitors boo the fact that A, there's nothing going on in the arena, and B...
They're also there for jump cuts, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Integrity preservation.
I see. Right.
You can tell just by watching it, there are at least 4 or 5 very obvious edits taking place here, and that's what they were doing. That's what they were in there for. I think the fans knew that. The fans definitely knew they weren't seeing anything, and they were very pissed off, and it gets worse. When we get back, we see Mankind blinding Undertaker by letting off a gas valve. Undertaker recovers, but the screen goes darker. What is happening? I think somebody then gets hit with a pipe shot right to the balls. The crowd go, ooh, anyway. So what else could it be? Mankind definitely hits a running knee with the Undertaker prepped against the metal door. Shortly after this, we then get some crowd applause, which I think is unconnected to the match. Did Vince buy around? I don't know. Mankind climbs a staircase, then sort of hits an elbow from about 10 feet. It was more of a flat arm, really. He's dominating with very boring offense, and my interest is starting to wane. Yet more transmission difficulties, and the crowd really get on its case this time. After what feels like a couple of centuries, we cut back to Mankind setting up a ladder with Undertaker laying on the floor. Undertaker recovers, shakes the ladder, and Mankind falls onto some boxes. Now, the ladder actually clearly got stuck in the ceiling, so his planned fall didn't happen. This wasn't broken. He landed halfway on the boxes, and his entire bottom half hit the concrete floor. His fall wasn't broken, his pelvis somehow wasn't. I have no idea how. It's just horrible, sickening. Undertaker nears the door, but Mankind recovers and belts him in the knee. Mankind crawls to the door. Undertaker hits back with a fire extinguisher. He just about gets out the door, but Mankind drags him back in. Mankind shuts the door, then crawls away and gets out. He tries to barricade the door, but Undertaker powers his way through. We now see them brawling down through the locker room walkway as various mid-carders look on. To nobody in particular, Steve Austin shouts, "Kick his ass!" We needed that as well. JR helpfully compares this to a prison riot. Mankind pulls a coffee machine onto Undertaker, because, hey, why the hell not? And they now make it to the arena. Hello, Cleveland. Hello, Cleveland. Rather than running for the urn, he waits for the Undertaker. He walks into a clothesline, and the crowd give a very relieved pop that they are seeing some live action. The two brawl down the aisleway, inching closer and closer to the ring, and they eventually make it to the apron. Undertaker gets his face rammed into it, and then Mankind pulls back the protective mats. Mankind actually hits a pile driver onto the concrete. He crawls to the ring, but Undertaker recovers quickly and grabs his ankle. They then battle on the apron. Undertaker jars the ropes, and a Mankind takes an ST plunge head first onto the concrete, landing fully on the back of his bonds. Jesus Christ. Whilst I retaste my lunch, Undertaker gets in the ring. He gets down on one knee, but Paul Bearer isn't giving him the urn. He's just turned his back on the Undertaker. Mankind gets in the ring, again recovering pretty quickly, and applies the mandible claw. Paul Bearer starts to laugh and is then seen polishing the urn. Another mandible claw, and then Bearer slaps the Undertaker over and over. Mankind lays in some big and very stiff-looking kicks to the head. Undertaker still manages to inch towards Bearer. He crawls up towards him, gets a waist height, and then Bearer cracks him over the head with the urn. He hands it to Mankind, and Mankind is the winner. The two leave together as Paul Bearer has just turned heel. He turns to the camera and says, "I'm Paul Bearer, and you're not." The Undertaker is in the ring, and he is out of it. After a few seconds, a Gregorian chant kicks in. Yes, really. And some droids appear. They then carry the Undertaker's lifeless body out of the arena. Well, you don't see these things every day, Bob. I'll give us that, but hang on, what did we just see?
Well, I mean, I did spend a good portion of this match trying to work out how WCW would really overcomplicate it. Like, it'd be a boiler room brawl. They're starting the boiler room brawl, made their way back down the ring, made their way back to the boiler room. And they got something from the boiler room, and then it was a race to the ring. Like, I would imagine something like that. There was enough novelty in this match. There was enough, we're in a boiler room kind of feeling going on to probably mask the stages in the matches that weren't really going anywhere. There were some nice set pieces. The boiler room, I thought, was a bit overly static. Now, I must admit, I thought that, and within about 30 seconds, Mankind did discharge a gas valve in Undertaker's face, which is quite nice. But I kind of thought for a boiler room brawl, they perhaps should have done a little bit more in that, I was wondering, for a boiler room, shouldn't it have been really, really hot? And they didn't ever really tell that story, which was one kind of point. We've also got Mankind trying to kill himself. There is that, which is, pretty predictable these days. And yeah, my main takeaway from the match, we'll come to the Bearer turn in a bit, I'm sure. My main takeaway from the match, other than the quite comical screw up with the cameraman between the edit from the day before and the edit live, where they had a cameraman basically by the boiler room door in the corridor, and then between that, the pre-tape shot, and when they shot through into the corridor from outside live, the cameraman disappeared. That wasn't ideal. But I think my favourite part of the match was when they got out of the corridor and they started wandering from into the main corridor along towards the ring. And they looked like two pissheads on a night out. They were just staggering from side to side as like these crowds of WWF wrestlers were like cheering them along. Yeah. Enough going for it where I can't be too critical, but it wasn't great.
I think we just worked out what happened to the stray bottle of Jack Daniels. Steve, what do you reckon?
Well, I've been really into this feud so far, and this sort of boiler room brawl into the match, into the ring, very much a match of two halves. I didn't really enjoy the boiler room stuff, but I really enjoyed the stuff that was happening in the arena. And I think if we would have got a bit more in the arena, it could have been a lot better. The stuff in the boiler room didn't work for a lot of reasons. Yeah, there were a couple of nice set pieces, but it seemed to be so far removed from, literally so far removed from the arena that the crowd just really weren't into it. I thought it was quite jarring, the fact that we had virtually no commentary. In fact, I would have preferred no commentary, but what we got instead was just oohs and uff and little sort of noises from Vince and from JR. It would have been better with no commentary then if you were going to do that, but that really removed it. But once we got into the arena, I thought the brawl was pretty good. There was Foley coming off that apron onto the concrete. I mean, jeez. All right, it's not the highest height in the world, but you're coming down with some weight on the back of his head. And
Foley cannot possibly be able to walk in 10 years' time doing this, can he?
Can't, if he keeps it up. And to be honest, when he first signed for the WWF, I thought, great. They're not. He's got to tone it down. But if anything, he's got worse. And I mean, if he continues on this trajectory, then as you say, he's not going to be able to walk in 10 years. The guy. But I really liked it. It was nice, and it was stiff, and it seemed realistic, and it was a bit too realistic actually. But it was really, really good, and I thought the ending was a bit drawn out, but was great, and was a really interesting twist. For a load of reasons, for the reason of the match, for what it now means for Mankind's character, for what it now means for Taker and his character going forward. I'm really, really intrigued now to see what happens next.
If this match had been written for, say, a comic book, I think it would have been one of the greatest things ever. The story that they wanted to tell, that Undertaker was stepping into Mankind's own personal dwelling, a place he's never been before, where he has no idea what's coming. Mankind lives in a boiler room. He knows what to do in there. They could have told an amazing story. However, the characters of Undertaker and Mankind are played by human beings, and professional wrestling actually takes place in the real world. So, the boiler room element can only be 10 or 15 minutes of people hitting each other with things which may or may not actually hurt. The stigma that kept on the match did damage my enjoyment of it quite a lot. Any mystique that there might have been was heftily eaten into there, which is a pity because they, best they could, they did beat 4 or 5 shades of each other out during this, it must be said. It got wearing very, very quickly because, in a practical sense, and you have to book to your audience, in a practical sense, there's only so many things you can actually do without it looking too hokey and too ridiculous, plus Mankind trying to kill himself. And from a very practical point of view, if I was a paying fan, I would have been seriously pissed off. I know this is a hot feud, as you rightly say, Steve. It's been going on for a long time. They've come up with something very different for them, which is good. And yet 15 minutes of it take place in something which was recorded the day before, and I'm just watching it on a big monitor. And to make matters worse, you keep putting in transmission difficulties to hide edits. I mean, as a paying punter, I'd be mad as hell for that. Yes, it really did pick up when they got back to the ring.
As a paying punter, are you that bothered by the edits?
Not necessarily the edits, because as I said in the when I was doing the blurb, it is integrity preservation, making it look as good as it can. I don't have a problem with that.
But it was so long, though. I mean,
it went on too long.
If they were making edits, and they were piecing it together and stuff, but the interference or whatever you want to call it, the sort of the tracking or whatever, just went on for so long. It didn't make any sense really why it had to be that long, and I think that's probably what pissed the audience off. We're like, come on,
exactly.
We can barely see what's happening.
There's one thing to remember here. Sorry, Steve. Go on, Karen.
Well, we can barely see what's happening anyway on these, a couple of CRT monitors that you've rolled out at ringside. But now you're feeding us this sort of transmission error for, I mean, it probably didn't even last a minute, but it felt like 3 minutes. I can see why people would be pissed off.
Carry on, Bob.
Yeah, well, I mean, Steve essentially made the point I was going to make, but just, I mean, think about this. You had Sid and Bulldog, which had a decent bit of crowd reaction. That was about an hour ago. Since then, we've had Goldust and Mark Merrow that nobody cared about. An interview with Farouk Assad that nobody cared about. A promo from Jerry Lawler that nobody really cared about. A match against Jay Rolls that nobody really cared about. And then 20 minutes of a boiler room brawl that if you're in the front 4 or 5 rows, you'll maybe be able to watch on TV. And if you're in a good angle on the video wall, you'll probably be able to watch. But I would wager that, because that's the thing, like, to get the boiler room across, they had to strike this nice balance between enough lighting where you could see it, but enough lack of lighting that looked real. I can't imagine if you're sat in 60-70% of the arena, you particularly were able to see what was going on. And this just took forever. That, I think, really impacted, from an in-person perspective, would really impacted on your enjoyment of it.
Yes, I think, Bob, earlier when you were talking about would WCW over-egg the pudding somewhat, and starting off in the ring and heading back down to the boiler room and coming back, You know what? I think I'd almost have preferred that at this point.
I think they'd have put the boiler room on the hallway.
That would have been hokey, but it would have been fine. That would have been okay if they could make concession stands.
Could they not have maybe peppered it through the show? You know, you think of the Goldust Piper back at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
They sort of, you know, they put it in between a couple of the matches, and you know, all right, that was, I mean, you know, it was a bit sort of hokey, wasn't it? But they put it in between the matches, and then they spilled into the arena, and then we got the match. Would that have worked a bit better? Maybe we just seen sort of bits and pieces of the brawl throughout the match. Would that have worked?
Yeah, I reckon
throughout the event, I should say. Sorry.
Because I think that would also get over the fact that these two just can't be contained. The standard boundaries of a professional wrestling match are far too great for the hatred that these two feel for each other. So a situation where they're just going all over the arena, we keep cutting back to them. Okay, it's been done before, but I would have had less problem with that. I was really trying to believe the boiler room portions, but I just couldn't, because something as prosaic as the fact I couldn't see what was going on. And when I could see what was going on, it was two big men semi-gingerly hitting each other with things. The story was there, but the execution wasn't, and it's a pity. It's not the fault of the two competitors. And so when it got to the ring, it did get better. And we need to talk about this. Steve, Paul Bearer turning heel. Right decision? Wrong decision? What do you think?
I thought it was good. Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, it wasn't executed absolutely perfectly as maybe... I don't know, Bearer maybe, you know, it dragged out a bit long. But what they wanted to achieve, and you've already mentioned, you know, they wanted to tell this story, and they didn't quite reach the story and the level. But I think it's a really good move, because, you know, Taker's been around now for, you know, 5-6 years now. I think he needs a refresh. Quite what the refresh might be, I don't know. I mean, I can take or leave Bearer. You know, I don't think he adds anything to Mankind's act, but it'll be interesting to see what he does and where the feud goes from here, now that Mankind's got the upper hand in the storyline. You know, he's got sort of control of the air and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't have a problem with it, and I thought it worked really well in the story, because as I say, I've loved this feud. I think it's been a great feud. Boiler room bit aside, I still thought it was a great match-up when we got into the ring and into the arena. But yeah, thumbs up from me.
Bob, your thoughts on evil Paul Bearer?
Yeah, a good time to do it. Execution was passable, not great. Bearer throws a nice work kick. I'll say that. But yeah, it's. I think it's a good move to prolong the feud. It's a good move. I think it's one of those turns that seems to, obviously a turn of a manager, actually seems to benefit both guys. So yeah, fan enough of this, I would say.
Yes, I am still in two minds, to be perfectly honest, about how they executed the turn. It was because the crowd knew that Bearer had turned heel long before he'd actually weighed in with the Earn shot. I suppose in a way, rather than just doing an out of nowhere swerve by just belting the Undertaker with the Earn without any pre-prep, it's slightly less inverted commas realistic. But they did egg it just a tiny bit too much with him starting to laugh and polishing the Earn. It made it look slightly more comical than it needed to be, and this is somebody turning on the Undertaker. Make no mistake. But that's a small complaint. I still think it adds a lot to everybody involved. My only real concern, I'm just going to jump ahead very slightly here, is you'll hear it a bit later on in the show. Paul Bearer's heel promo on Raw was not very good. The explanation was poor, in my opinion. I won't spoil it all for you now, but it was as if it was almost your bog standard turning on your tag team partner heel promo. It might as well have been, I don't know, Rick Martel walking away from Tito Santana or something. It was a little more than just the old, oh, you've held me back, now I'm with somebody else who's going to fire me on da-di-da-di-da-di-da. No, this is an otherworldly event. The Undertaker sits outside these boundaries. You've got to give me a reason to care. You've got to tell me why. And also, this is take it into employment territory. What's Paul Bearer actually going to do now? Because if he's not working for somebody who's in a funeral home, is he going to have to change his name?
These things need to be considered.
Unless Mankind's going to get a job at a funeral director's. Oh, I'm thinking about this far too much, aren't I, really? And just briefly, guys, so Bob, just quickly to you. Would you put this down, if it's the whole Boiler and Brawl match, would you always put it down as brave folly?
How do you mean?
Do you think that the WWF deserves some credit for giving us this, even though in the end the execution probably beat them?
Yeah. I mean, you know, they're trying to build this feud out probably for a few more months. Rather than seeing 3 bog standard Undertaker Mankind matches, yeah, I'd go with it. It had just about enough going for it where I think it worked.
Yeah, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I say, the bit in the arena I preferred, but the fact that they did something different, you've got to say, yeah, you know, fair enough. They did something that we've certainly not seen before, executed this way in the WWF. The fact that it was pre-taped makes you think it could have been a bit better. But yeah, you know, something different, and it extends the feud. And as Bob says, you know, we're not just going to get to see, you know, 3 or 4 of the same matches. They've tried to do something different.
Yeah, they really tried. I applaud them for that. It goes back to the video package before the match, saying that this isn't just your bog standard professional wrestling feud, and as such, this isn't your bog standard professional wrestling match. So we for the last few minutes we've talked about all the problems with it, and I think they're all entirely justified. But you know, Icarus and all that, aim for the sun. Not always going to get there, going to get your wings burnt, but they tried. And I must be said, I'm very interested, especially with Paul Bearer switching, seeing where this goes next, because we haven't seen the last of this feud. And you know what? I'm very pleased with that, because for all the flaws, they've really got something with these two guys. Right, we're approaching main event time, and we cut back to Doc Hendricks interviewing Vader and Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette tells us that Shawn Michaels' voice will, and I quote, sound like Peter Frampton's electronic kazoo. You're only 20 years out of date there, Jim. Vader stomps to ringside and throws the steel steps around. Whisper it, this is starting to finally feel like a big match. Shawn's music kicks in. A young lady jumps the barricade to hug him. JR says this, it's 2:30 in the morning in the UK, but I guarantee those folks have had one hell of a wake-up call. Gee, we bloody need it, Jim. Right then, here we go. WWF title match main event. Shawn Michaels versus Vader. Vader poses to booze, and we lock up. Vader gets the better of Shawn with some big strikes. Shawn catches Vader's boots, hits a dragon screw leg whip, followed by a drop kick to the now prone Vader. He kicks him in the face and hammers away while still on his knees. Vader gets dodged over the top rope, that's the best way to describe it, with a shit can. Shawn then hits a baseball slide, then absolutely flies over the top rope with an amazing crossbody. Astounding airtime on that one. He scares off Jim Cornette. Yes, really? And we head back into the ring with a double axe handle. The story here is that he has to keep Vader grounded to have any chance of winning, which is simple but brilliant. He then hits a beautiful Rana as Vader tries to pick him up. Then, in a contender for one of my favourite moves of the year, Michaels leaps onto Vader's shoulders and then victory rolls him over the top rope. In the same movement, he skins the cat back in. Beautiful. Michaels then flips into a head scissors over the ropes, but this time Vader catches him and powerbombs him on the mats. Vader picks up the groggy Michaels on his shoulders, walks him up the steps, and then just sort of dumps him in the ring, which was a little weird. Vader's now in control with some more huge punches in the corner, followed by a fantastic-looking suplex and some very stiff strikes to the chest. Shawn gets Irish whipped to the outside. Back in for a huge back body drop. Vader goes for a back suplex, but Shawn flips it onto his feet. He attempts a slugfest, but loses easily. Again, simple but brilliant storytelling. Shawn tries punches again, and again loses. Vader hauls Shawn up after going for Shawn tries to skin the cat again after we fall near the ropes. Vader hauls him up over his shoulders, and again flings him down to the mat for our first pinfall attempt of the match, actually, and gets 2. Vader's rubbishy-looking sleeper thing kicks in just to kill some time, which is that sort of thing where he just holds the shoulder. It doesn't look good, but the crowd were into Michaels trying to battle out of it, and battle out of it he does, with a diving knee to the bollocks. Vader then goes for a sit-down splash, but he gets another shot to the balls. Clothesline knocks Vader down. Okay, now it gets this very, very interesting exchange. Shawn Michaels goes up for an elbow drop with Vader lying on the ground. However, Shawn twists in midair and lands on his feet. He then stomps away on Vader. Shawn loses his cool and his character and very audibly shouts, "Move, move," at Vader. I believe the original plan here was for Shawn to go for an elbow drop and miss, but Vader, for whatever reason, didn't move. Shawn quickly, to his credit, realised that, but again he let his temper get the better of him. We'll talk more about that in a bit. A crossbody sends both men out, and after a short while, Vader picks Shawn up and throws him neck first onto the guardrail. Vader gets in the ring, and the bell rings, and Vader wins by countout. That's our first portion of this contest. Steve, up to this point, what do you think?
This was really good, yeah. Vader's looked really, really good. I like the fact that I was expecting Vader basically to dominate the match and we'd get a big comeback. I like the fact that it went back and forth. I like the fact that Michaels was holding his own. The storytelling was really, really good. Noticeably, Michaels didn't do, or I should say Vader didn't do what Michaels wanted him to do, and he lost his cool a bit, but he was able to salvage it, and I don't think many people would have really noticed what was going on. But yeah, it was really good storytelling, and it wasn't what I expected, to be fair. I just thought Vader would dominate him, and we'd get the big comeback, and then we get the we get what we think is the end of the match, and up until that point, it's been really good, and I want more.
What are your thoughts so far?
It felt like a really great classical piece of music played in just the wrong key. Felt like a really gigantic match that just had something wrong with it. In the sense that you might look at it on the surface and go, why isn't this a huge match? And not that it was far off, but it was far enough off. I also kind of felt it was a bit too back and forth. I kind of felt the money would have been in Vader just beating the living shit out of Shawn and then Shawn fighting back. It kind of felt a bit like every time Vader looked like he might get ahead, Shawn would cut him off. Still pretty good though, but yeah, a couple of things wrong with it.
Yep, I shall elaborate on all of those when we go through the rest of the match. So Vader has won by countout. His music starts, but Cornette grabs the mic, telling us that he doesn't want it like that because we came here to win the title. He tells Shawn to get back in and the ref to start the match again because we want a winner. Shawn gets led away, but Cornette continues to taunt him. Shawn decides, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to come back to the ring. Howard Finkel tells us the match will continue, and the crowd love that. Vader gets straight onto Shawn. The referee gets distracted by Jose Lothario, and Cornette whacks Shawn with the racket. Vader hits the Vader attack, followed by a big belly-to-belly. Shawn out at about 2.7 on that one. Vader goes for a powerbomb. Shawn punches his way out of it and knocks Vader to his feet. He hits the big forearm, followed by the kip up, and the crowd are really feeling it. This time he hits the elbow off the top rope. He tunes up the band, but Cornette grabs his foot. While he's doing that, he throws in the racket. Shawn grabs it and starts whacking Vader with the racket. Justifiably so, says Vince. Nice. He then belts Cornette with it, and the bell is gone. It's a DQ win for Vader. Do you know where this one's going? Cornette grabs the mic and he says, well, Jim, we've had a lovely day, but we're going to let somebody else have a go. No, he doesn't. He asks for the match to restart. I double dog dare you, you stinking coward. Unsurprisingly, the match does restart, to much less crowd reaction this time, I must say. So we're back for the third time with Shawn hitting a diving punch, followed by an elbow off the top rope. Once again, he tunes up the band and Sweet Chin music is on its way. And this time he hits it. We get one, we get two, and Vader kicks out Sweet Chin music. The crowd lose their minds at that because this is history. Right here, right now, this is history. Bloody heckfire. Vader recovers and he throws Shawn into Hebner, who gets bumped. Vader hits a big powerbomb followed by a bridging pin. Mike Chioda comes in for 1, 2, and Shawn kicks out at 2.9, and now the crowd are going absolutely berserk. Vader drags Shawn's limp body to the ropes and he's going to go for the Vader bomb. He sets up for it, but Cornette is telling him to go to the top rope. Jim Ross gets on commentary and says, that only means one thing. And if he means Shawn Michaels is obviously going to move, then I'm sad to say that he's right. The crowd again kind of saw that coming and the moment is slightly gone. Yes, Vader only hits the canvas whilst going for the moonsault. Shawn recovers and ascends the ropes and hits his own moonsault press. Kind of, sort of. He rolls up into the cover and gets 1, he gets 2, and he gets 3. Shawn Michaels retains the WWF title. He gets given the belt as Mr. Perfect on commentary, offers to get in there and knock him out myself. HBK gets his hand raised, allowing himself a very, very real-looking smirk, and we are done. Bob, your thoughts on all of that? New finishes, botched finishes, and all. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel at the expense of a really, really good match, they decided to book a pretty good set of stuff. In the, this whole kind of build has really lacked the drama and the, it's really lacked the edge that this match really could have been their biggest match of the year, probably since WrestleMania, certainly. You might argue in Summerslam main event it is, but it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like they quite got the build of Vader. I don't feel like they quite got the build of this feud right either. That being said, at the expense of a great Michaels and Vader match, and we might get that down the road. I like Vader kicking out switching music. I liked the, bit with the false finish with Vader pinning Shawn. Or the near finish, and I liked the bit where Vader set Shawn for the Vader bomb, and Cornette says, "Go up one more." I felt like that made perfect sense in the moment, in that it was exactly the kind of thing that Cornette should say, because he's his manager, tactician almost, and it was exactly the kind of mistake that cost Vader the match, and I think that makes a lot of sense too. I thought they wrote a very good ending to this match. I just feel like it kind of came at the expense of a really, really good match. So 2 pretty big thumbs up rather than huge thumbs up.
Stephen.
Bob, as you say, we might get a really good match down the road, and that's what it felt like to me. This felt like the start of a feud rather than, which it shouldn't have been, because, as you rightly say, this is the main event at SummerSlam. This is the second biggest pay-per-view that the Federation do. This should have been, the end of the feud, or it wasn't. It felt like the beginning. But that being said, I loved it, and I really, really hope that we get to see these two go at it again on pay-per-view, because I don't think it was overbooked. I liked everything about it, but not as the end of the feud. If that's it, if this was sort of the third time the rubber match, then yeah, but it wasn't. So I really bought into it, and I just hope that we do see it again.
I love this, quite frankly. I thought the storytelling was as close to perfect as you were going to get from WWF main event style. Shawn Michaels knew that the only way he was going to try to beat Vader was to use his own quickness, his own agility, his own speed, and to keep Vader on the ground. Unlike certain other people in certain other organisations, who I won't mention now because I'm far too kind, he didn't just go out there and have his standard match and let the other person work around it, whoever can I mean. He wrestled Roman, I wouldn't say wrestled a completely different style. He was still unrecognisably Shawn Michaels. Yes, he skinned the cat. Yes, he did all the dancing and prancing when he was on and Vader was down on the ground. Yes, of course he did that. We want to see that. But everything he did was appropriate for the match. And I do agree with you to some degree, Bob. Perhaps it was a little bit too 50-50 at times. I would like to have seen, in the early going, for the first 3 or 4 minutes, I'd perhaps like to have seen Vader really dominate. And then Shawn's tactics would then come into play. They go, hang on a minute, he's hammering me here. I've got to try and get this guy on the ground, or it's going to be over in 6 or 7 minutes. So I probably would have done it that way. But I thought the storytelling and the work, and these two, some of the sequences they managed to pull off were breathtaking. If you haven't seen it, the victory roll into a skin the cat, watch that now and watch it back and forth. I did not like the multi-booking. That seemed to me like an olive branch to Vader to say that Shawn's going over in this one at the end of the day. So we're going to give you 2 judgment call victories. Yes, we're going to let you kick out a sweet chin music. We're either going to give you a visual pin on that powerbomb. We're going to give you those because you ain't winning the title today, mate. And the way that we tend to look at things on this podcast, it seemed a little too obviously that to me, and it did, as we say too often in this place at times, I must say, took me out of the moment. And unlike you, Bob, I didn't like the very finish. Just go for the Vader bomb. Go for the Vader bomb. You're going to beat him. Don't get caught up in the moment. One of your favourite matches, Bob, I know we talk about it a lot, and rightly so, Spring Stampede 94, Vader against the Boss. Vader hits the Vader bomb in that one, but the Boss kicks out. Then Vader goes for the moonsault, he hits it, and then he wins. So I can see what they were doing, and it did ratchet up a little bit of tension, but I knew what was happening, the crowd knew what was happening, and it did take me out of it. Plus the fact Shawn, unfortunately, nearly botched a finish as well. I think it was supposed to be a rolling moonsault press, but he didn't quite get it right. He sort of hit Vader and sort of bounced off him, so it didn't really look like a super finish. And it's a shame, because I love the storytelling, which at their best only the WWF can do, and these two worked really bloody hard in there, despite Shawn's little tantrum. And it's just a shame. I just hope that in the future, with Vader getting the visual pins, etc., and the 2 wins, this has to set a rematch down the road, and I do hope we get it. But one more on this. It's a very simple question. It goes to you, Bob. Should Vader have won the title here?
That was exactly the point I was going to make now. Yeah, I might have done it. They in a sense that they kind of almost told the story that would have made it work. Shawn hits the super kick, Vader kicks out, Shawn gets desperate, Vader wins, you get a new champion, you get Vader on top, and then you've got a fresh set of matchups, and you can almost, if you like, go from Shawn to Vader. Shawn can't beat Vader, and then have Bret come back and beat Vader, and then go back to Bret and Shawn. There's an interesting little triangle you could have worked there. But yeah, because I suspect the answer is going to be more matches against Vader, but I don't know that there's many opponents for Shawn right now. That they're teasing the Mankind thing, but I suspect Mankind's going to be intertwined with Undertaker to one degree or another for the next few months. Yeah, I'd have strongly considered it.
Steve, how about it?
Do you think plans changed? Do you think it was considered? And with Ahmed on the show?
Doubt it.
Do you think that might have changed things?
All I will say on that is the Ahmed Johnson match on the 19th of August Raw. Now, I don't think that they would have thrown away a huge babyface match between him and Shawn Michaels on a Raw. Right? I think that's something you really build up to. Ahmed's first title shot against the newly crowned heel champ Vader, where it just comes up short on television. Yeah, I can kind of see that happening. I'm projecting.
Yeah, but you don't not give the title to Vader just because you haven't got a Raw main event.
No, I'm merely putting this out there because I don't think the plan was for Vader to win the title here. I don't think it was. If they really were going to have Ahmed v Shawn on Raw was their original plan, then okay, yes, I know SummerSlam isn't Raw, but they obviously, with Raw being recorded so far ahead, they obviously had that one, that was obviously the plans they had. So, I don't know. Sorry, Steve, we cut you off there. So, do you think Vader should have won the title? We could sit debating for a long time whether he was going to, should he have?
Yeah, I think he should have done. I think, as for all the reasons that Bob said, whether or not, we can debate whether or not he would have done if circumstances had been different. But I think the time would have been right for I think he's looking good. They've built him since he's come in. Was probably back in January, I think now. And the time would have been right going into then the end of the year. And I can't disagree with, but I think it would be brilliant booking to have Bret come back at a Survivor Series, or even at the Rumble, and to take the title from Vader. That just sort of then sticks in Michaels a bit, then, doesn't it? I couldn't do it, you did it. I wouldn't want to see another Iron Man match at next year's Mania. But I'd like to see Bret and Michaels go at it again. and that would have been a really good, interesting way of doing it.
We're going to be getting Shawn versus Bret 2 at WrestleMania next year. That is, if that isn't set in stone, then nothing ever should be, as far as I'm concerned. The question is how we get there, and I think that's a fantastic story to get there. I really, really do. I'd never thought about that. I think that almost writes itself in a way, and it gives you months' worth of television leading up there. I tell you what, if Vader took the title yesterday, Bret, just imagine the pop if Bret takes the title off Vader at, say, the Royal Rumble. Shawn wins the Rumble. Yes, it's 3 years in a row, but I can live with that. And then we get an ultra-hot babyface match, Shawn v. Bret 2 at WrestleMania. Cool. Please, really do take my money. Jumping back a bit to the context of where we are now, I'm going to disagree with you. I think Shawn was right to hold the title here. Maybe he should have actually won it slightly less emphatically than he did, but that's open for debate.
I might have had him pin him off the moonsault.
Yeah.
That would have given Vader an out in that you couldn't beat me, I beat myself. That would have been stronger.
You know what? I'd have been okay with that. That would have been an excellent finish. Yep, I'm with you every step of the way. Vader, he's getting there, but he still isn't quite hot enough yet to be that marauding heel champion that he should be and that he was in WCW. They're playing catch up with Vader quite a lot. They are getting there now, but they're still, I think, 3 or 4 months behind where they need to be with him now. Maybe that means they do this again at Survivor Series and Vader does take the title and Shawn chases it for a little while until Bret comes along. I don't know. But Shawn winning the title, retaining the title in storyline purposes makes sense, although I just hope that the guy can actually hold it together a bit more than he can, because that tantrum he threw in the match, it's not the first time this thing has happened since he's been the champion. I do think it's getting to him. He really needs to try to rein things in a bit and not let his emotions get the better of him, because it's I can understand it. The pressure's on him. His buddies aren't around. It's him people are tuning in to see. That's going to get to anybody. I'm not criticising him for that, but he's got to try to hold his emotions together better, because otherwise, well, he could end up with the title being taken off him, and who knows what might happen. A slippery slope. He just needs to hold it together, because in the ring he is without equal. So a positive to end on SummerSlam 1996 there. Steve, your thoughts on this pay-per-view, and this will be fun, a score rating out of 10.
Well, for me it was, like I said at the start of the podcast, one match stands out, and that was the main event. Half of the Boiler Room Brawl stands out, and then nothing else did. It wasn't, considering this is meant to be the WrestleMania of the summer, the second biggest show that they do, it wasn't really that at all, was it? It was really disappointing, actually. And I think, at the time, and I think Bob said, when you watch it at the time, it didn't actually think that bad, but on reflection, it was there was a lot sort of wrong with the show, and I'd give it a 5.
Bob, over to you. Don't be shy.
Yeah, not a lot to add. I've already said 3 out of 10. The main event's pretty good. The Boiler Room Brawl is noteworthy. Everything else is pretty abysmal. 2.5 for me, I'm afraid.
Ooh.
Because this is SummerSlam. This isn't in your house. This isn't even WrestleFest. This is SummerSlam. It's the second biggest show of the year. Give me a reason to care about it. Don't just throw out 5 matches with no real rhyme or reason to them and expect your 2 big matches just to carry it. 2 of the matches we saw were appallingly bad. The 3 other matches were just about okay, but that's not enough. In very different ways, the 2 main events did deliver, but that's because I would expect them to. One for the spectacle, and one for the people who are actually in it. That's almost not really saying very much. And you cannot treat a show like a SummerSlam like this, especially when you're managing to hold it in a big arena. You've got 18,000 people in there, which for a WWF pay-per-view outside WrestleMania
that is a big attendance. You know, look at the regular In Your Houses, they get what, 4, 5, 6,000, if that. So you've got to, when you get an audience, you've got to try to treat them to something worthy of the name, and they didn't do that. So whilst perhaps taken all solely in a vacuum, it wasn't a 2.5 show. I was very, very let down by this. So SummerSlam 1996 goes in the books with a mere 2.5 out of 10.
The final Raw of the month, as there is no one next week, is on August the 19th, and we begin with Vince McMahon narrating a video package on the Boiler Room Brawl. He asks, did The Undertaker expire? Our first match is the opening contest of the Intercontinental title tournament, interestingly picturing Owen Hart against the British Bulldog. We get interference on screen, which JR attributes to The Undertaker. Owen wins by countout after a spin kick to the outside. Afterwards, Sonny on commentary douses Bulldog with a drink, whilst claiming he tried to look up her skirt. Cornette emerges and very audibly calls her a slut. Vader easily beats Freddie Joe Floyd as the lights flicker. Jim Ross interviews Mankind and Paul Bearer. Bearer says he turned because he is sick and tired of being sick and tired of being abused after caring for The Undertaker. Mankind will face Shawn Michaels for the title at Mind Games. He says that in the past winning hasn't been his priority, but now he will take the chance to destroy the lives of the clique. Gregorian chant music goes up and the Druids bring Undertaker to ringside. Bearer says it's his decaying corpse. After a while, Undertaker sits up, the heel Scarper, and Undertaker poses. A video package airs for The Stalker. Heel hunts and prey in the WWF. We get a sudden death battle royal next, being Goldust, Savio, Vega, Steve Austin and Sid. Everyone gangs up on Sid to eliminate him. He responds by chokeslamming everyone. Austin gets slingshotted out by Savio. Savio spin kicks Goldust but gets low-bridged out when going for a charge. Goldust will face Shawn Michaels at Raw Championship Friday on September the 6th. Our main event pits HBK against Yokozuna. Yokozuna now seemingly a heel again. Cornette attacks Lothario during the match, which otherwise is won by a sweet chin music from Shawn after 6 minutes.
My question, Mr. Paul Bearer, is why destroy the legacy?
There it is. That death blow right there.
Why? Because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm tired of carrying The Undertaker for the last 6 years all around the world, leading him to the World Wrestling Federation titles and everything else.
Let these morons shut up. Show some respect.
Abused. I'm tired, Jim Ross. And now...
Don't worry, you should feel the presence of The Undertaker. The essence of The Undertaker is right here in Wheeling, West Virginia.
It's not The Undertaker. It's Mankind.
That's right, it's Mankind.
Mankind has the feeling now. Mankind has the power now. That is the spirit you feel.
Mankind also has the mandible claw that WWF champion Shawn Michaels has felt.
Yeah,
Shawn Michaels has felt it on one occasion. But on September the 22nd, with the WWF title on the line, you have a chance, Mankind, to wear the gold and once again utilize the mandible claw on the champion.
You know, Jimmy, my body is still racked in pain from the Boiler Room Brawl. And I love it! But you remember this, and remember it real good. Since my birth in the WWF, winning has never been my priority.
The lights. What is
it was simply a way to create more misery for my opponents. But now Paul Bearer has shown me that by defeating Shawn Michaels at In Your House for the WWF title, not only will I make Shawn Michaels the least sexy boy toy in the world. In one night, I will have the chance to destroy the lives of the millions of the clique all around the world.
Oh, that'll be great. Could you imagine Mankind with the WWF title?
Makes me happy. You see, it's very simple 1-2 plan. One, I put Shawn Michaels' shoulders on the mat for a count of 3. And then number 2, I put his shoulders on a hospital bed for eternity.
You know what this is all about. He's here. He's here. The Undertaker's not gone. You can feel the presence of the Undertaker. We can all feel the presence of the Undertaker, and so can you.
That is not the Undertaker. That is not my Undertaker. That is not your Undertaker. It's my Mankind, you feel.
That's right.
It's not the Undertaker.
The
Undertaker's gone.
Nobody's seen Undertaker
The
since he was carried
Undertaker's
out of the ring.
passed away.
Oh, great.
Yes, he has. He's gone for eternity.
Couple of discussion points before we finish up here today, both of which we heard in the news earlier. The first of which, the very interesting suggestion that the WWF are going to be giving us weekly pay-per-view events in addition to their monthly pay-per-views and their Raw and I believe Superstars programs. At time of recording, they haven't yet found a cable company to carry it, and it looks like interest in the office might have cooled, but it certainly hasn't gone away completely. There's still the suggestion that as soon as next month there could be pay-per-views coming up for $9.95, I believe is the price, possibly raising to $12.95 if it all goes well, being broadcast at midnight on Saturday for 52 weeks a year.
This is a wind-up. This can't be true.
Have Wade and Dave ever lied to you, Bob? Come on.
I'm not saying their information.
If I hadn't seen it from such reputable sources, I would not have believed it myself. But apparently that's where we're going. And let's take it at face value. And Steve, let's just roll with it for now. So
if we roll with it, then
let's roll with it. Roll with it and take your time. So here we go. Here's the 2 questions, and take these however way you want.
Go on.
One. In general, do the WWF need an hour at least of brand new programming at this point? And 2, are weekly pay-per-views on a Saturday night really the way to go?
Okay. I think they do need another hour of TV of raw quality, not superstars, but raw sort of quality, whether that's on cable or whatever they can get it on. I like the idea of a program of an hour or whatever being on a Saturday night. I think midnight might be a bit too late, but you know, I'm not an expert on American TV viewership. To me, midnight seems quite late, but if that works and if they're sort of saying midnight would be good for them, then who am I to argue?
It might just be for their West Coast audience. That's
so what's
possible.
that, 10 o'clock or something like that, is it? Yeah.
10-9, yeah.
Yeah, and if that means that they can go in a different direction or move into a slightly different direction as an alternative to ECW, say, then I think all that could work. There's always going to be loyal WWF fans who will watch every minute of every show and pay for every pay-per-view, but how many of them there are, I don't know, and I don't know whether the WWF knows, that would then be willing to pay every week for a pay-per-view. You've mentioned about getting sort of the cable companies on board. So if they don't get all the cable companies on board, then obviously there isn't going to be as many houses that are going to be able to access these weekly pay-per-views. So that harms things. I mean, again, I don't know. I don't know what the numbers are going to have to be in order for them to make a profit. They're going to be pre-recorded, so obviously that keeps costs down, I guess. When are they going to tape them? You know, if they tape them the night before, then yeah, that's great. If they decide to tape them as a block or something to keep costs down, then I don't think that's going to work. And you can't really tape them on the same night as you're taping a couple of Raws or a couple of Superstars, because you'd like to think that it's going to try and aim to a different audience, so you can't really tape them all together. But I'm not against it of another show, and I'm not against another hour of TV. I just don't think there's enough people who would pay for it. Is there?
I've got to be honest with you, I'm not sure I would. Bob?
Oh, come on, this is a terrible idea. I mean, look, they can't get enough people to watch their show for free on a weekend, let alone get them paid for it. They don't have enough talent, as we've already explored. They don't have enough scope for doing this. They don't have enough scope financially for doing this. They don't have enough depth. They don't have enough storytelling angles. They don't have enough stars. If you're going to do a weekly pay-per-view, you have to sell people the main event every week. Just imagine the pay-per-view that is headlined by the Smoking Guns and the Godwins for the tag team titles.
I had that dream once. Yeah.
That gets 300 buys at $9.99 or $9.95, whatever it is. It's never going to happen. Come on. I mean, if they do a pay-per-view split with a cable provider, they'll have to give the cable company 50% of the pie. Yeah. They'll have to give them that. Like, they're making $5 a go on 15,000 buys a week. Like, they'll lose money. It's never going to happen. I'd be stunned. But there's no logical rationale. They've got no star depth. It just won't work. It barely works now with one pay-per-view a month. They struggle along just about finding main events. Like, the weekly pay-per-view number 13 that is headlined by Savio Vega would possibly do one buy. That is possible. It's a terrible idea.
What about an extra hour though of just TV, not pay-per-view, but just TV, late night? Do you think that could work? Something different? If they did something different, though?
I don't think they've got enough depth. I mean, it could, but it'd have to be television. Pay-per-view is just death. If it was television, if they had a few extra guys, maybe.
Steve, you tried. But no, I'm with you, Bob. This is a simply ludicrous idea. I had to do a double, triple, quadruple take when I first saw this in the sheets a couple of weeks ago. This is Vince, presumably Vince, panicking, and when Vince panics, he lashes out in the wrong direction. They haven't got the depth for another hour on Monday nights, let alone what sounds like being in a show completely different in scope on a Saturday night when people are actually out, living their lives. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. I mean, you're like, what are they going to do? I mean, I've just got the image now of the pay-per-view buy sheet coming in. It's got one name on it. It's got Savio Vega's mum at the top. If that doesn't tell you this is a stupid idea, and let's face it, that sort of thing could happen, then I don't know what will. They're clearly spooked, heftily spooked by WCW. I mean, when I gave the ratings out earlier, they're being absolutely trounced. So it looks like they're trying to park their tanks on ECW's lawn? No, you can't. You can't get around the enemy that way. You've just got to fight them. You've just got to fight them head to head. Improve the product you do have with your rather slim roster at the moment. Don't run before you can walk. They're not in a position to throw out a completely different show with a completely different mindset at this point, and they're certainly not at the moment a hot enough company to be able to get a regular amount of people to charge them $9.95, $12.95 on a Saturday night to pay it. As I say, looking through the sheets now, just as we've gone up to recording, it looks like certainly the companies and possibly even the Federation themselves have cooled on this slightly, and I sincerely hope that they just junk this idea. It would be creatively, commercially, it would be suicidal. They've got to fight WCW directly, so it's got us talking, but I think for WWF, the time for talking is over. We need some serious action, and weekly pay-per-views on a Saturday night are resolutely not it, I'm afraid. Our final discussion point of this month is somebody by the name of Bret the Hitman Hart. You might have heard of him out there. Bob, it looks like terms have been agreed on his WWF return, although he hasn't signed a contract yet. WCW are still knocking around, so this is far from a done deal. But the WWF themselves seem fairly convinced that he's going to be rejoining them, make an appearance, again, possibly as soon as next month's pay-per-view. What do you... When we talked about it, you came up earlier, the possible idea about him feuding with a champion Vader, although Vader would need to win the belt first. Where do you think they will go? Where do you think they should go with Bret? And indeed, is he right, if he has re-signed, to re-sign with the WWF?
As we've said before, they need to get to Bret against Shawn in the main event of WrestleMania, but they need to get there without them facing each other between now and then.
Yep.
And the most likely outcome is they will put Bret in a series of quite uninspiring mid-card matches and then decide that eventually, we better preheat him up now it's WrestleMania season. I think it would have been better, as I said earlier, the best way to make Bret look strong is to have Vader defeat Shawn, then Bret can defeat Vader, and obviously that can take place over 3 or 4 months, and then get round to either Shawn and Bret at WrestleMania, or Shawn, Bret and Vader at WrestleMania. You get Bret in the main event without facing Shawn. You can tell a story with Shawn that involves him potentially winning the Royal Rumble again, as you say. 3 in a row just about works. Yeah, that's the way to do it, but I think it's much more likely that they'll bring Bret in and they'll stick him against Goldust.
Oh, God, what a depressing thought, but I think you're probably right. Steve?
Yeah, I can't see him going to WCW. You know, there's some people that just, are WWF guys. There are some people that are WCW guys, and, one of them is Bret the Hitman Hart, and I just cannot see him ever being in a WCW ring. I'm sure Turner's money is really, really good. I'm sure that whatever contract they give him will be, very few dates for a lot of dough. But I just think that Bret Hart, he's a WWF guy, isn't he? So I don't think there's any sort of danger with him signing for WCW. And as you quite rightly say, it's Bret and Shawn at next year's WrestleMania, isn't it? How we get there, yeah, I have to agree with Bob. That booking situation just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I think a clean match between the two of them. I wouldn't want to see another Iron Man match, although you wouldn't rule it out, because I think Vince and the Federation seem to think that Iron Man match was like absolutely fantastic. When it just wasn't really, was it? But maybe if we got an Iron Man match that had about sort of 5 or 7 pinfalls in it, it wouldn't be too bad. But we're definitely going to get that again next year, and it'd be really interesting to see how we get there.
Just sign Bret v. Shawn for WrestleMania right bloody now. Just sign it. I almost don't care. Almost don't care how we get there. Just I want that in the books right now. It just beyond has to happen. The mood music to me suggests that this is as close to a done deal as you can possibly get, and Bret is going back to a WWF. He is a WWF guy. I, for one, just cannot visit him anywhere else. He's out and out synonymous with the World Wrestling Federation. Even more so than our current WWF champion, I would say, to your average man on the street, now that Hogan is elsewhere. They have to try to get him back, and it looks as though they've done it. I sincerely hope, Bob, that you're wrong on this one, and they don't give Bret the 95 treatment and stick him in there with the likes of, I don't know, who is it? Well, Lafitte and bloody Isaac Yankem and all that.
Hakushi as well, wasn't it?
That was at least a good match, but again, that was just mid. But that was the opening match, wasn't it?
Lawler won it. That was the other one, Lawler.
Oh yes, I mentioned him enough today already. But yes, if they're going to bring Bret back and they're going to build him, which sounds such a ridiculous thing to do with Bret Hart, for a match at WrestleMania, put him in there with what big guys you've got. Somebody like Austin, that would work. Or, like you said earlier in the show, Steve, I would have no problem at all if they can maybe tweak the story a little bit, give us another Bret Owen match on a PPV.
I'll be all for that. Yeah, it'd be great. Yeah. Do you think as well, though, when we do get, sorry to jump in, but when we get to WrestleMania, a clean match between the two of them, or are we going to see some sort of would you imagine some sort of
2-hour Iron Man match?
Not another hour. I got to ask Steve a minute ago when you were talking about 5 or 7. I thought you were going to say a 5 or 7 hour Iron Man match.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't give them ideas. It was back in April after Bret left for a while. I thought that at SummerSlam we were going to be talking about Bret v Shawn 2 here, and we weren't. More's the pity. And that we're going to get with a slightly screwy finish, and we were going to get a rubber match at WrestleMania with a virtual heel Bret. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen now. We're going to be getting that match in 7 months' time, and I'm already very, very excited by it. But they have to treat Bret. They can't. They have to treat Bret Hart like Bret Hart. Don't just treat him like he's another guy. Don't let certain people maybe hold him down. Bring him in and make a big deal of him, because let's be honest about it. WWF are really lacking major star power at this point. It's Shawn, and then it's a bit of a drop off. Vader's probably your number 2. He's already a fair way down. Okay, he's probably on a par with Sid right now, but it's very lopsided even then. So you've got to get Bret in, and you've got to make a big deal of him. You've got to do it fast. And hopefully we're going to see him back doing that very, very soon indeed. Maybe by this time next month the contract will be signed, sealed, delivered, and he'll be there because the WWF badly need him. And that will conclude our very lively discussion on the WWF here in August 1996. I'd like to thank Steve Halvorsen. Steve, my man, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure.
You can be found on the Twitters.
I certainly can. Uncredited bit part, you will see me on there.
Lovely. And Mr. Bob Bamber?
Thank you very much.
Where can people find you? Do your plugs, my man.
Well, you're doing the rest of them, so it's just me at Bobby Bamber.
That's our boy. I'm Rory McNamara. You can find me on Twitter on RorsDM, get my name right, RORSDM. We are, of course, Wrestling 20 Years. You can find us on Twitter at Wrestling 20 Years. Also, please check out the website. There's tons and tons of content there, including my forthcoming review of SummerSlam. I know you won't want to miss that one after my effusive praise for it today. You can catch us on iTunes, and if you're on iTunes, please do leave us a review. What do you like? What do you want to hear more of? What do you want to hear less of? Your thoughts on the show format, anything at all, please put it on there, be it positive or negative. They all get read. They all get paid attention to. And there's a huge back catalogue of stuff on there now. We've now got going all the way back every month from August 1993.
Yeah, 3 years. Fuck.
3 years we've been doing this now. I've been on the team for 9 months. I have now, as of 2 days ago, I finally listened to the one podcast I hadn't heard before, which is the December 1993 one. Complete with
that's a good show.
It is a very, very good show.
That's Starcade. That's a decent Starcade show that's entirely based around one match, Vader, ironically enough. That's a good show.
I really enjoyed that. I actually went back to watch that Flair Vader match because I hadn't seen it before, funnily enough, and I thought it was awesome. I thought you did an excellent job describing that one. One thing I will say for our listeners as well. One thing you did do towards the end, you sort of half time machine mode and half out, which I thought was an interesting mode of discussing things.
What was that?
You were talking about the state of the WCW and WWF rosters, and you were sort of talking about it in the present tense, but you're also using a phrase like, nobody thought that Steve Austin would have exploded at this point when he's in a 2 out of 3 falls match with Dustin Rhodes, and then he's nobody had him down as somebody winning the title at WrestleMania 5 years later.
Yeah, I think that was out of.
It was.
I think so. Yeah, it was about 2.5 years ago. We recorded it now, but yeah, I think it was. It was just the thing that we were discussing stuff at the time, i.e., what they were doing, and then kind of looking at it versus how it turned out. I'd have to go back and listen, but that sounds about right. I don't think it was a hybrid or anything like that. I think it was just more us discussing stuff in timeline and then comparing it to 2013 at the time.
For somebody who manages, like me, to snap into time machine mode quite scarily easily, that one really did stand out to me. And the debate on the greatest fat wrestlers of all time was quite a telling one as well. You mentioned this guy Kevin Steen. I have no idea what happened to him. Just think, by the time this podcast goes out, he could be WWE champion. I doubt it, but he could be.
Universal champion.
That sounds good.
What a load of universal.
No, it doesn't. It's only slightly better than weekly pay-per-views in 1996. But
he will be the Raw champion. None of this universal tripe. God Almighty. Maybe in 20 years' time we can discuss what we think of that as well.
Yes, well, I was at that show. I was with the people who were booing that belt, although largely because it was about 4 hours in, we were all a bit bored. No further comment.
I think that's probably sensible. But yes, everybody, please, if you, especially if you're new to the show, especially as we're now moving towards a time where things in the industry are really, really starting to hot up. Obviously, the NWO are now firing on all cylinders. We're still a good year away from the Attitude Era probably kicking in, but the methods that the WWF actually employed to take us there, not including weekly pay-per-views, I think are fascinating. So it's a real retelling of a history lesson for me, for somebody who has actually started watching at this particular point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree.
I think it's fascinating, Steve. Yeah. I was watching it then, this time 20 years ago, as a pure fan.
Me too.
Now here I am watching it as live through analytical eyes, and I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. It's brilliant.
I actually remember, it just goes to show, I actually stayed up late to watch SummerSlam 96 as live. I even had my own little calling card, if you like, of match predictions that me and my friends actually came up with. I actually predicted Vader was going to win, by the way, and I put a tick in the checkbox after he won by count out, and I didn't got afterwards. So I'm watching that as a pure, almost entire mark, and now watching it now through these new eyes in 20 years' time, but as live, I think is fantastic, and I think that's one of the real things that we on this podcast bring that you don't really get to hear anywhere else.
There is a good reason for that, but yeah, we'll take it.
Don't do yourself down now, Bobbers.
Hey, look, if you're going to create a format, create one that nobody can copy, even if it's not any good, right? That's the...
We're in a field of our own, my friend, a field of our own. Anyway, that's enough mutual glad handing for 1 month, I think. I have been Rory McNamara. This has been Volume 1 of the August 1996 Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. Again, just to remind you, Volume 2 is in 2 parts, WCW show, and our Volume 3 is our ECW show, so check those out as well. We'll see you all again next time. I have been Rory McNamara, and until said next time, goodbye.